An early morning house fire results in a horrific tragedy.
We get a call for a structure fire with a person trapped inside.
The flames were immense. They burned to death.
Leaving a small Texas town searching for answers.
There were no accelerants. There had been nothing that showed physically that a fire had been set.
Was the mysterious blaze simply an accident?
We found a broken bottle of what we later determined to be Wild Turkey 101.
Or was there another explanation?
They both had boyfriends, girlfriends.
The answer in the end would hinge upon one deceptively simple question.
Without a clear arson finding, you can't have murder.
May 14th, 2003. It was just before 4 a.m. when Ren and Lindsay O'Neill were startled awake by a pounding at their front door in Little Elm, Texas. Outside, they found their next-door neighbor, 29-year-old Rhonda Ore, and her 10-year-old daughter.
My only memory is saying, the house is on fire, call 911, I gotta go get Jimmy, he's stuck in the bedroom.
Rhonda's husband, Jimmy, needed a wheelchair to get around, and he was still trapped inside when firefighters arrived moments later.
The firemen put out the fire just enough to try to get in, and eventually they found Jimmy.
Rescuers rushed Jimmy outside and began resuscitation efforts on the front lawn.
I remember them doing CPR, and I remember this rush of relief, they got him out.
But it was too late.
Around his mouth and nose was black, so you could tell that he had taken a lot of smoke.
What had caused the deadly blaze that ripped through the bedroom where Jimmy was sleeping? An examination of the charred remains shed little light on the mystery.
We were unable to determine a source of ignition.
Though they didn't find it in the house, the Ore's personal life did offer some possibilities.
He and Ronnie were getting a divorce. Things obviously were not good at home.
They didn't get along well enough for the marriage to last.
Had the fire truly been an accident? Or had the couple's differences finally reached the flashpoint? Rhonda and Jimmy Ore first met in 1998. At the time, Rhonda was living in suburban Dallas with her 5-year-old daughter.
It was just me and her, just our own little family.
Lonely, the 25-year-old single mother started spending more time online. That's where she met Jimmy, who worked as a recreational therapist at a Dallas area rec center.
I was playing internet games, and we met in a Dallas area room, and we started talking.
Soon their online conversations grew into a near-daily correspondence, and it wasn't long before the pair decided to meet.
I said, well, how will I know you? Because we'd only talked on the internet and on the phone. And he said, well, I told you about the chair, didn't I? And I said, no, what are you talking about?
Rhonda learned that Jimmy was partially dependent on a wheelchair, disabled from the waist down as the result of a childhood accident. But when Rhonda met him at a shopping center, she quickly witnessed how little he was confined by his handicap.
James was not paralyzed. He had some balance difficulties from an accident when he was younger. And he used the chair more because it was easier. If he had something to hold on to, he could walk. There wasn't anything that Jimmy couldn't do.
He didn't want to be considered handicapped. He wanted to be typical.
But while impressed with Jimmy's capabilities and eager to grow their friendship, Rhonda told Jimmy she wasn't ready for a romantic relationship.
We started out as friends. I had told him that I wasn't going to get married again. I was perfectly satisfied as a single mother, not looking for a relationship.
Rhonda may have been satisfied, but she was also impressed by how Jimmy treated her daughter.
He was just a good-hearted guy, very, very into and concerned and interested in Rhonda's little girl, and talked about her constantly.
He was loving, doted on her, spoiled her to some extent.
Jimmy's obvious affection for the little girl didn't go unnoticed by Rhonda. Before long, she and Jimmy began dating.
If you knew James, it's not surprising, but he won me over.
He's always loved children and wanted to be married and have a family.
So in January of 1999, after only a couple months of dating, Jimmy decided to make it official.
He took me up to the big ball you see in the Dallas skylights. At the top of the world, as far as you can get in Dallas, he proposed.
4 months later, the couple married, and Rhonda and her daughter moved into Jimmy's home in suburban Dallas.
It was great. They had a nice big swimming pool in the back, and they'd have birthday parties, and Jimmy'd be out grilling hamburgers and hot dogs.
To help out the young couple, Jimmy's mother and stepfather picked up the tab for some of their expenses.
We did a lot for those kids. They're struggling, you know how it is when you get started.
The assistance was welcome, even if Rhonda bristled at her mother-in-law's intrusions.
We didn't have the best relationship. Every minute of our lives, she ran things. She just took over.
Even though Marian was generous with gifts and things, she had expectations with her son, Jimmy, as well as with Rhonda.
Despite the strain between mother and daughter-in-law, the arrangement did have its advantages. Jimmy's mother told the couple she and her husband would help cover tuition for them so they could both go back to school. Rhonda for nursing and Jimmy for computers. They also provided Rhonda a job at the family sheet metal business.
I told her she could work for us part-time. I would pay her whatever she had been making working full-time until she got her degree so she could have a career.
The charity didn't end there either. In late 2001, the Pools also helped the couple finance the construction of a new custom home outside Dallas in the town of Little Elm.
We had doors widened so that he could have access to every room. Pretty much the whole house was accessible to Jimmy. There wasn't any area he couldn't get to except the attic.
Designed to accommodate Jimmy's wheelchair, the new home provided the couple with plenty of space. Unfortunately, they'd soon need every inch of it. In the spring of 2002, not long after moving into their new house, the couple started drifting apart.
He began to want different things, and our interests just kind of went separate ways.
Jimmy had joined a car club and began going to shows and racing cars with his friends.
James had a black SS, a Camaro SS. We'd go to drag race events and he'd race the car at a drag strip.
Rhonda was rarely there to cheer her husband on.
The car things, she wasn't interested in that. They really didn't have much in common.
It was something Rhonda made quite obvious on the few occasions she did show up at the racetrack.
He'd be out looking at the cars, talking with all of us, or working on his car, and she always was sitting down reading a book, and she just seemed detached, like they barely knew each other.
Before long, Rhonda and Jimmy were living more as roommates than soulmates.
They were living in separate rooms, and they were no longer intimate.
There was just a parting of the ways. Things just weren't working out.
By the fall of 2002, Rhonda and Jimmy both agreed their marriage had failed, but didn't file for divorce just yet. Instead, they decided on a trial basis to remain living together under one roof as friends.
I don't think there was never an attorney. There was never anything legal done. They were just married. They were just had agreement to live separate.
I took care of him. We still went out to eat. We still went out to movies. I mean, we lived just as we had before. It really wasn't a change because we were friends all along.
And since they were no longer intimate, both Rhonda and Jimmy eventually sought solace in new relationships.
He got himself on an internet dating site and had met a couple people and was just kind of having dating fun.
Rhonda also started a relationship with a mutual friend of theirs.
Jimmy had his girlfriend. She had nobody. And I think this whole relationship come about because it was kind of shoulder to cry on.
Soon, Jimmy and Rhonda's platonic relationship began to unravel.
He finally decided, I can't do this anymore.
In November of 2002, Jimmy finally asked Rhonda for a divorce, but he asked nicely.
She was in nursing school. My husband and I were paying for her to get a bachelor's degree in nursing. And so he told her, I will stay until you're through with school, and then I want a divorce.
They were separating under very friendly terms. They had visited with the listing agent to put the house up on the market to sell, and were parting as friends.
It appeared, at least from the outside, to be an amicable divorce. Wednesday, May 14, 2003. Just minutes before 4 a.m., Denton County emergency dispatchers received a harrowing 911 call, reporting a house fire at 3081 Big Leaf Drive, the home of Rhonda and Jimmy Ore.
My next door neighbors are, I don't know if I've called already, but they have a fire at their house.
Worse, according to the caller, there was a man trapped inside the burning home.
Her husband is in a wheelchair and he can't get out.
Within minutes, emergency vehicles arrived at the Ore home.
Upon arrival, it seemed like there was a good, 15 to 20 people outside, and there was a fairly large crowd.
There were people yelling at us, trying to drag us off the engine when we got there, saying, hey, he's inside. Her husband's inside there. Please go help.
Firefighters rushed into the smoke-filled home.
It was completely full of smoke. There was a smoke line all the way to the floor. We had to crawl or pretty much be on our hands and knees to get to the back bedroom.
The whole bedroom was on fire. I made my way towards the right and looked in the bathroom and shined my flashlight in there, and that's where we found the victim.
Pulling Jimmy from the flames, firefighters rushed him outside. They started CPR, but the prognosis wasn't promising.
You could see some charring around his mouth. You could tell that he was in bad shape.
Unable to revive him at the scene, paramedics loaded Jimmy into an ambulance and rushed him to Trinity Medical Center in nearby Carrollton, Texas. Rhonda followed moments later, loaded into a second ambulance.
I felt obligated to go ahead and get her transported as well to a medical facility to have her checked out.
Upon her arrival at Trinity's emergency room, she asked everyone she passed if they knew the status of her husband.
I asked the paramedics, I asked everybody, what's going on with my husband? What's going on with my husband? And I remember a nurse looked at me and just said, oh no, he didn't make it.
Coming up, police question whether the tragic fire really had been an accident.
I kept telling him, come on, let's go, let's go.
She felt that he was just fighting to stay in this room.
Whenever I grabbed him his phone, he just came back. How had I tried to phone? He came back.
On the morning of May 14, 2003, Rhonda Ore sat in the emergency room of Trinity Medical Center in Carrollton, Texas. The 29-year-old wife and mother was being treated for possible smoke inhalation. Hours earlier, a sudden blaze had ripped through her home.
There was heavy smoke coming out of the front door, flames coming out of the rear of the structure.
Rhonda and her 10-year-old daughter had escaped, but her husband Jimmy, partially dependent upon a wheelchair, hadn't been so lucky.
He got trapped and was overcome by smoke.
I finally called my best friend and I was just like, Jimmy didn't make it. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Jimmy's mother, Marion Poole, was equally hard hit.
Mother's Day, which was the last time I saw him, he asked me to meet him for lunch that following Wednesday, May 14th. He died early that morning, so I didn't get to see him.
While the realization sank in with Rhonda, firefighters were still dousing her home. Hoping to determine what had caused the blaze, investigators started collecting evidence back at the house and contacting witnesses.
Somebody at the hospital told my mom they wanted us to come back to the house. The police wanted to talk to me.
Minutes later, Rhonda arrived back at the house with her daughter.
I asked her to sit down in my patrol vehicle, and I asked her to tell me, as in much detail as she can, how things transpired that morning.
Seated in the patrol car, Rhonda told investigators she wasn't exactly certain what sparked the fire in her house, but she suspected it might have something to do with her husband, a tipped-over candle, and a bottle of whiskey.
What do you think actually caused the fire? At that time, my first inclination was that he knocked the candle out.
Apparently he had candles near the bed and built the drink near the candles, and that's what started the fire.
According to Rhonda, the entire scenario had begun the evening before the fire. She told detectives that she and her daughter had been watching television in the living room when Jimmy had suddenly wheeled through the house, heavily inebriated and slurring his words.
She said he comes rolling through the living room at about 10 and that I'm toasted and I'm gonna go to bed.
He was in a great mood. He was smiling and he was laughing.
According to Rhonda, Jimmy had wheeled down the hallway to his bedroom and gone to sleep. A few hours later, Rhonda was startled awake by the blaring of the home's alarm system and the smell of smoke. She told police the smoke had come from Jimmy's bedroom.
When I got to the room, Jimmy was sitting on the side of the bed. There was a candle knocked down on the floor, and the liquor bottle was laying on its side on the end table, running all over the carpet.
He's patting it out with a towel, and she's, complains to him, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'll clean it up, don't worry about it."
Rhonda said she'd then returned to her bedroom and gone to sleep. But it hadn't been long before she'd been reawoken by the smoke alarm.
My first instinct was, here we go again. And I got up and I went out in the hallway, and immediately you could tell it was much different. There was smoke, you could see smoke way up high.
Rhonda said she'd rushed back down to Jimmy's bedroom.
The door was closed, but under the door, you could just see bright flickering. And I was like, oh my God, it's on fire.
Realizing the bedroom was now engulfed in flames, she'd yanked her daughter from her bed and, according to Rhonda, immediately ran next door for help.
She went to the next door neighbors.
My only memory is saying, the house is on fire, call 911, I gotta go get Jimmy, he's stuck in the bedroom.
Rhonda told police that she'd left her daughter with the neighbors and then sprinted back to her burning home in an effort to rescue her husband.
I got there to the door and the bedroom door was open and Jimmy was on the floor. Behind him was just a 14-foot wall of fire.
Rhonda told investigators she'd entered the flaming room and tried to help Jimmy into his wheelchair, but she said he'd violently fought her assistance.
Whenever I grabbed him and pulled, he just kicked at me. How hard I tried to pull, he just kicked at me.
According to her, she felt that he was just fighting to stay in this room.
Was he simply drunk? Or was Jimmy, his marriage a failure, and his family falling apart, determined to die in the flames?
I couldn't understand why, and I kept telling him, come on, let's go, let's go.
The fight ended, according to Rhonda, when Jimmy suddenly kicked her in the chest.
Rhonda Ore stated when Jimmy kicked her, he kicked her so hard that she went out of the bedroom, the door slammed behind her, and it locked.
I was there in the doorway, and I just kept screaming, Jimmy, come on. Jimmy, come on. I don't know what's wrong with him. Just come on.
Unable to open the door, Rhonda said she'd run back outside and asked her neighbor, Ren O'Neill, for help.
Mr. O'Neill went straight to the bedroom and she wanted him to kick it in. He felt the door and decided that that wasn't going to be a good idea for his own personal safety.
Rhonda told investigators that moments after that, police and fire officials had arrived on the scene. Following Rhonda's interview, police allowed her to return to her worried family. That didn't mean they believed her story, however.
She did not appear as she had been in a struggle in a house or a bedroom that was fully involved with fire. Anybody that was put in that position would have had soot on them, and that just wasn't the case.
At the scene, Rhonda's clothes, hair, and skin had been clean. And while she had gone to the ER as a precaution, the hospital had quickly released her, unlike two police officers who'd tried to rescue Jimmy.
I had just had 2 police officers transported to the hospital. They had smoke inhalation, where she had no evidence of that whatsoever.
Those weren't the only reasons detectives doubted Rhonda's rescue story either. Later that morning, investigators spoke with Rhonda's next-door neighbor, Ren O'Neill. And his version of events from the night of the fire differed considerably from Rhonda's.
Mr. O'Neill told us he immediately went over to the house with Rhonda.
There'd been, according to O'Neill, no solo attempt at a rescue on Rhonda's part.
Her statement that she had gone back in an attempt to rescue her husband. Mr. O'Neill's statement totally refuted that. And again, another red flag that what she was telling us was not exactly correct.
That was hardly the last startling revelation laid on the detectives that morning either. Rhonda's mother-in-law, Marion Poole, arrived on the scene a few hours later.
She pulled me aside. She said, "There's something not right about this. Rhonda told me at the hospital that James was drunk and James started the fire."
It was the same story Rhonda had told police. But as Marion pointed out, there was one big problem with the story.
Jim never drank. That can't possibly be true.
Was Rhonda lying? Or had Jimmy hidden his drinking from his own mother? One thing was certain. Investigators were starting to believe there was a lot more to the story than a simple house fire.
We started really, thinking that, this was really going to be a murder case and it wasn't an accident.
Detectives had a chance to explore their theory later that morning when fire investigators finally entered the home and began to sift through its charred remains.
We found a broken bottle of what we later determined to be Wild Turkey 101. We found the candle that Miss Ore talked about in her statement.
That much at least seemed to confirm Rhonda's account. However, after 2 full days of investigation, fire investigators were no closer to knowing how the blaze had actually begun.
We were unable to determine a source of ignition.
A canine search said there were no accelerants. There had been nothing that showed physically that a fire had been set.
At the end of May, investigators received the results of the toxicology screen on Jimmy's body. The findings only added to the investigators' suspicions. There may have been a bottle of Wild Turkey in Jimmy's bedroom, but Jimmy, according to the report, hadn't touched it.
There was absolutely zero alcohol in Mr. Ore's body at the time of death.
The toxicology report discredited Rhonda's account of the events that took place that night, with her personally observing him drinking alcohol.
Coming up, police suspect foul play was behind Jimmy's death, especially when they learned that a third survivor had escaped the flames.
James, he had told me that she had seen somebody else, cheated on him.
By June of 2003, Little Elm, Texas police and fire investigators were still searching for answers in the suspicious house fire that trapped and killed Jimmy Ore.
He couldn't get away, and he crawled in the bathroom, and he couldn't go any further, and he died. There's no doubt in my mind he was conscious as he began to burn.
Due to the inconsistencies in her statements to police, detectives suspected Jimmy's wife, Rhonda Ore, might be behind the blaze.
With all these red flags adding up, then we're starting to get a little bit suspicious.
But an initial examination of the home failed to turn up any signs of foul play.
The original fire marshals couldn't really determine arson. Well, if you don't have arson, you can't have murder, because he burned to death.
And considering how accommodating he'd been about postponing a divorce, what motive could Rhonda have for murdering Jimmy? Over the next few weeks, they spoke with several of Jimmy's friends from his car club. Investigators learned Jimmy had planned to move out of the house he and Rhonda shared.
We were supposed to move him that weekend right after it happened.
But hadn't Jimmy promised he'd stay with Rhonda until she finished school? Why the sudden change of heart? Jimmy's friends provided police with an answer. Rhonda and her daughter weren't the only ones who survived the tragic fire. There was also Rhonda's unborn baby.
Rhonda was pregnant by another man.
And it was the pregnancy, according to his friends, that finally prompted Jimmy to file for divorce.
He was very upset by it, very bothered by it.
He said, "I'm not doing this anymore." And so he was going to move out and go ahead and get the divorce.
And a divorce, as the investigators learned, would cost Rhonda a lot more than her marriage.
Marion Poole, the victim's mother, was paying for her school. We had learned that Marion had actually put the down payment down on the house.
And if the divorce didn't cut Rhonda off from Marion Poole's money, the pregnancy surely would.
Rhonda knew that as soon as Jimmy's mother found out that Rhonda was pregnant with another man's child, she would be finished financially.
She didn't tell me about her pregnancy until several weeks after my son died.
By then, police suspected Rhonda no longer needed her mother-in-law's money.
We had received several phone calls from insurance companies that were inquiring as to Mr. Ore's death.
We discovered more and more insurance policies on James, which totaled, well up towards the $1 million range.
And the beneficiary? Rhonda Ore. To investigators, the motive was undeniable.
Basically what it boils down to, in my opinion, is she killed him for money.
Police were all but convinced that Rhonda, pregnant with another man's child, had set the fire to both stave off the impending divorce and collect on Jimmy's insurance. There was, however, one big problem with their theory.
We really couldn't put the match in Rhonda's hand.
There was no confession of any type. There's no eyewitness.
In an effort to extract a confession from Rhonda, lead police detective Donald Deviney called her and requested that she meet them at police headquarters.
He said he had copies of the final police report and to meet me up there.
At the police station, Rhonda and her daughter were ushered into separate interrogation rooms. And as soon as Rhonda walked in the door, she realized she was in for more than a simple review of the police report.
There was a Texas Ranger sitting in there, and I started to feel a little uneasy at this point.
Seated across from Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy, Rhonda was asked again what specifically sparked the fire in her home.
She initially gave the same story, that Jimmy had been drinking alcohol and had set an initial fire that set off the fire alarms.
When he came through the living room, it was pretty obvious to you that he was...
Oh yeah, he was laughing and he told me that he was toasted.
But midway through Rhonda's statement, Ranger Murphy confronted her with the toxicology report that directly refuted her story.
Ronnie, would it surprise you at all to know that he had no alcohol in his system?
Yeah, it would. He was laughing and he said he was toasted.
Then Ranger Murphy asked Rhonda about her husband's life insurance policies.
Why would you have close to $1 million worth of life insurance on Jimmy?
I don't have close to $1 million.
We've come up with $900,000 so far.
From where? I
The
haven't.
insurance policy you've taken out on it.
As soon as we provided evidence that she could not dispute, she became very defensive and completely changed her demeanor.
Rhonda refused to change her story, however.
It was basically, that's my story and I'm sticking to it type of conversation.
But what about Rhonda's daughter? Police were also interviewing her in another room. During a brief break in the interrogation, officers shared what they'd learned from her daughter. It wasn't good news for Rhonda.
Jimmy did not will through there and said he was toasted. She said that you told her to tell us that.
I don't believe you.
That's what she said.
In a final attempt to squeeze a confession out of Rhonda, Ranger Murphy turned up the heat.
I basically accused her of murder. And at that point, she called me a name I can't repeat here, and pretty much the interview was over at that point.
That afternoon, the police let Rhonda leave. However, investigators were confident they were on the right track. But the prosecutors, while armed with a mountain of circumstantial evidence, felt they were still short of a conviction.
Without a confession, without a clear arson finding, that would have been hard.
But what if the investigators at the scene had missed something? That October, in a last-ditch effort, investigators brought in a man named Ray Powell. With more than 30 years of experience, the veteran fire investigator hadn't exactly written the book on fire investigation. He'd written 6.
We brought in a tremendous arson expert. I call him the guy that invented fire.
Fire investigators, when they have an unusual fire, a lot of times they'll call and ask me about it or send photographs.
Although in this case, Powell did more than just look at photographs. 6 months after the fatal fire, he personally sifted through the charred remains of Jimmy's bedroom.
Mr. Powell went back over to the scene, did an examination of the area.
Earlier investigators had ruled out arson, mostly since tests had revealed no traces of an accelerant. But Powell wasn't too concerned. The whiskey bottle recovered from the crime scene, the one police believe Rhonda had planted, could have easily fueled the flames.
Alcohol burns clean. Unless they're looking for it, they will not be able to pick up the alcohol.
But if the whiskey explained away the lack of a traceable accelerant, Powell still faced a bigger question. Where'd the fire start? The burn patterns, according to Powell, indicated the fire that killed Jimmy originated from 2 different places within the bedroom.
We had a fire started in front of the window and another fire set in front of the door.
He was able to identify 2 start points. And anytime you have 2 start points, you have an arson.
But even more damning to investigators were the specific locations of the 2 fires.
We now had 2 points of origin that were in fact blocking Mr. Ore's ability to egress from the room. So this is when we were pretty sure that this was an intentionally set fire.
On February 26, 2004, Rhonda was formally indicted on felony arson charges.
When she received word that she had been indicted, she went and turned herself in.
Posting bond, Rhonda professed her innocence and predicted that a trial would exonerate her of all charges.
To be honest with you, I don't have a criminal bone in my body. I've never even been arrested. I've never been in trouble in my whole life.
Talking about a girl that never had really a traffic ticket.
Which is exactly why prosecutors feared it would be a challenge to convict her. Without solid physical evidence, their entire case hinged on the testimony of a single expert witness.
His report said arson, and it didn't take long to read his credentials to know that he was going to be a good witness.
Coming up, will a second opinion from a surprising source pour cold water on the prosecution's claim of arson?
They don't have to pay if a homeowner does something to their own home. They benefit from me being found guilty.
In March of 2008, more than 4 years since she'd been arrested, Rhonda Ore walked into the Denton County Courthouse to stand trial for the death of her husband, Jimmy. Charged with felony arson, the 34-year-old mother faced up to 99 years in prison if convicted.
She was charged with arson that caused a death. And it's the same punishment as murder. Murder one is a first-degree felony.
It was a trial that had almost never happened. The case had been stuck in limbo for nearly 5 years, while the Denton County District Attorney's Office had mulled over the strength of the state's evidence.
This was a circumstantial case, and circumstantial cases are harder to make than when you have good, solid physical evidence.
The case had been reset for 5 years. Witnesses' memories fade, people move away. It becomes very difficult to put it back together.
Among those who had moved on with their lives was Rhonda Ore. Out on bail after her arrest, she'd finished school, gotten a job as a registered nurse, and remarried. Her new husband wasn't, however, the man she'd started seeing while living with Jimmy. Rhonda had ended that relationship and the resulting pregnancy.
She had the abortion. I think she had told my sister that she just had miscarried.
But just when it appeared that the case against Rhonda would never see the light of day, the file had landed on the desk of Denton County's new prosecutor, and he had been determined to bring the case to justice.
Jimmy went to high school with my wife. She's the one that got me to try the case.
Rhonda had been equally determined to go to trial, even if her counsel hadn't.
He's trying to get me to plea bargain with him, and I told him, I said, before I'm anything, before I'm a mother, before I'm a wife, I'm a Christian. And I'm not going to walk into a courtroom, put my hand on a Bible, and say that I did something that I didn't do. Even if it means getting off easy, I'm not going to do that.
Proceedings began on March 25th. In his opening statement, prosecutor Carrie Peel painted Rhonda as a cold and conniving woman who deliberately set fire to her own home. But why kill Jimmy? The answer, according to the prosecutor, lay in her crumbling marriage and a bevy of life insurance policies.
She had taken out a series of life insurance policies on Jimmy to where it got to be $1.1 million.
And once Jimmy was dead, prosecutors said Rhonda hadn't waited long to collect.
By 12:25 p.m., Rhonda was already on the phone with an insurance company trying to report Jimmy's death and trying to start the claims process. And Rhonda had called 5 separate insurance companies by 3 p.m. on the day of Jimmy's death.
She called the insurance company while he's probably still smoldering.
Had Jimmy known he was so well insured? According to the prosecution, the answer was no. As evidence, they presented the insurance company's own findings. At least one of the final policies taken out on Jimmy was forged.
An insurance investigator asked us to look at a policy that my son's name had been signed to, and he wanted to compare it to my son's signature. That definitely was not my son's signature.
On cross, however, Rhonda's defense attorney reminded jurors that Jimmy had suffered from a disability. Could that not explain the suspicious signature?
At times, because of his difficulty, James did not write well, and his writing was not legible half the time. So I signed tons of things for my husband.
But it wasn't a pen that prosecutors were trying to place in Rhonda's hands. It was a match. And on March 26th, prosecutors called on the man they were counting on for a conviction, arson expert Ray Powell. Seated at the witness stand, Powell described how the charred remains at the Ore's home indicated that someone had set at least 2 fires in Jimmy's bedroom.
We took 8 to 10 photographs. We held it up for the jury to see. We explained the patterns on the photograph.
There was, in fact, a second fire that had been set, first the door and then the window.
Jimmy had been trapped. Rhonda, the prosecution argued, hadn't just cut off all the room's exits. She'd also set out to destroy her husband's means of escape.
The wheelchair was actually melted. Aluminum melts at 1,200 degrees. To have 1,200 degree fire at the floor level indicated to us that that may have very well been where she actually initiated the fire.
Powell's findings were a searing indictment against Rhonda. But were they accurate? After all, as the defense pointed out during cross-examination, months had passed before Powell ever set foot on the crime scene.
The witness called by the prosecution was not on the fire scene till 5 or 6 months after the fire and didn't have the benefit of knowing what the room actually looked like because it had been so disturbed by excavation efforts.
Convicting Rhonda, according to the defense, required jurors to believe that 6 months after the fatal fire, one expert could find evidence of arson. Not only that, it required that they disregard the opinions of other experts who did examine the fire immediately after the incident.
The fire examiner who was hired by the insurance company the day after the fire did not find multiple points of fire.
And when it was the defense's turn to present their case, they promptly called the insurance investigator Mike Keller to the stand. On March 28th, he testified that not only had he failed to find any evidence of multiple fires, he argued that there were no grounds to charge Rhonda or anyone with arson.
He said, he was in fact very emphatically clear that you cannot establish arson as a cause of this fire.
To ram the point home, Rhonda's attorney made clear to the jury that Keller wasn't just some expert brought in by the defense. The insurance company had hired him to look out for their interests, not Rhonda's.
An insurance company, they don't have to pay if a homeowner does something to their own home. They benefit from me being found guilty, yet their arson investigator is testifying for me, saying it's not arson.
It would be up to the jurors to decide which expert they believe. But before they broke for deliberations, lead prosecutor Carrie Peel made sure they didn't forget how Jimmy had spent his final moments trying to escape.
Got down on the floor and kicked and writhed on the floor like a snake.
It was an emotion-packed recreation of Jimmy's fiery final moments.
He's rolling around on the floor, flopping like, a frog on a hot pavement.
When Carrie Peel made his argument, I just wanted to stand up and clap when he got done.
But when the trial broke for deliberations on March 31st, everyone wondered which would impress the jury more, the scientific evidence offered by the defense, or the prosecution's emotional appeal? Coming up, the verdict is revealed.
It was almost as if like it was a dream.
On March 31st, 2008, Rhonda Ore sat at the defendant's table in the Denton County Courthouse. Accused of intentionally setting a house fire that killed her disabled husband, the 34-year-old widow and mother was awaiting the verdict in her felony arson trial. The jury had just broken for deliberations, and as the clock ticked by, Rhonda was quietly confident.
I knew that we had won. I mean, how could the jury have found me guilty? It didn't make sense to me.
A mere 2 hours after it had begun deliberations, the jury announced it had reached a decision.
We were surprised how quickly they came back, and several people said, well, this must be good.
Moments later in the crowded courtroom, the judge read the jury's verdict aloud. Guilty.
My head felt hot. I remember like a sense of shock. I didn't know, it was almost as if it wasn't real. It was almost as if like it was a dream.
But if Rhonda was shaken by the verdict, she never showed it, according to the prosecutor.
You never blinked.
Following the verdict, the jury handed down Rhonda's sentence, 88 years in prison. Jimmy's friends and family were elated.
I think that's fair because now she's going to lose what a lot of people consider the best years of your life. She's going to have to spend those in prison thinking about what she did.
Rhonda's first thoughts, however, were of her daughter, who wasn't in the courtroom.
I turned to my mom and said, don't let her hear this on the news. And then they took me away.
Whisked from the courtroom, today Rhonda sits in a Texas prison.
I said, if God's will for me is to be a beacon of his light in prison, you know, whom shall I send? I'll go. If that's his will, I'll go. And I'll continue to be a beacon for him in here.
But for those who recall Jimmy Ore's fiery death, Rhonda's beacon blazes with a very different light.
Her penalty is nothing compared to what she gave him. She gave him his penalty of death.
She was her adoptive parents' pride and joy.
They'd do whatever they could to make me the happiest child.
They tried to give her everything. They adored her.
Their joy and adoration ended, however, when a star-crossed relationship came between daughter and parents.
It was her first relationship where she'd been involved in sexual activity.
They disliked me being with him. They saw it as bringing me down.
But just as their fears appeared to be confirmed,
my mom took her to the drugstore and got a pregnancy test.
Their little girl would sink much, much lower.
911, do you have an emergency? I just killed my mother.
May 14th, 1997, Coral Springs, Florida. At 7:07 p.m., an Area 911 dispatcher received a chilling call.
Oh my God! Get the cops out here now! Okay, they're coming. She's fast, so I can't help her.
I was in shock, just like trying to absorb the reality of the whole situation.
And the reality of the situation was shocking, to say the least. The dead woman was Nikki's own mother. And according to what Nikki told the 911 dispatcher, she had died at her daughter's hands.
How did you do that? Repeatedly. There's blood over her and all over the floor and everything.
You could hear in her voice the terror, almost as if somebody else had done this.
But when the first officer arrived on the scene minutes later, Nikki took full responsibility for the crime.
I was screaming, telling them to come and arrest me.
For a young female juvenile to commit a homicide, that's a rare thing.
The search for answers would lead deep into the mind of a troubled teen.
She says, I can't believe I'm so obsessed with a boy that I would do something like this.
I used to be really religious and everything, and I used to live a really Christian life until I got involved with Carlos.
And Nikki's fate would hinge on the question of what mattered more, nurture.
They absolutely loved her to death, and I guess they felt she would reciprocate.
Or nature.
Mental illnesses have a strong genetic, predisposition.
Born in 1979, Jacqueline Nikki Reynolds had been 3 months old when her birth mother gave her up for adoption.
I didn't even know I was adopted until I was old enough to start asking questions.
Not that Nikki's adoptive parents, Robert and Billie Jean Reynolds, hid anything from their daughter.
My mom said that if I was ever ready, when I would turn 18 and wanted to find out who my biological mom was, and she would not keep that a secret from me.
They were a wonderful couple. They were wonderful parents. She was just their little girl that they adored.
A deeply religious couple, Robert Reynolds worked for the Florida Department of Transportation, while Billie Jean was an administrative assistant with R.J. Reynolds. From the very beginning, they did all they could to move heaven and earth for their beloved daughter.
They tried to give her everything. They were a church-going family. They adored her, and they treated her the way parents should treat a child.
It was probably a fairy tale lifestyle that I had as a kid. Very loving, never judgmental, never harsh on me.
Growing up in sunny South Florida, Nikki's bond with her parents only deepened over the years.
We'd go to the mall on Fridays, or I'd go to have ice cream with my dad and baseball games with my dad and go shopping with my mom. They'd do whatever they could to make me the happiest child, which I was.
There was one thing Nikki's parents didn't do, however.
She was never told no. She was a spoiled brat. There's just no getting around that at all.
Spoiled or not, by the time Nikki entered her sophomore year of high school in 1995, the Reynolds' approach to parenting appeared to have paid off.
I always had good grades, went to after-school programs, was very involved with the church.
Between church, school, and extracurricular activities, Nikki Reynolds had grown into a well-rounded teenager. But she was no longer Robert and Billie Jean's baby girl.
I started to be more interested in boys.
Boys also began to take more of an interest in Nikki, which in the spring of 1996 led to trouble. It was late one afternoon in March when neighbor Patty Gertz noticed a police car outside the Reynolds house.
And I had questioned Billie about it, and she had stated that Nikki had said that she had been raped.
According to Billie Jean, Nikki claimed she'd been assaulted that day after stepping off her school bus. But once the police were involved, her story had changed.
First it was somebody she knew, then it was somebody she didn't know.
Finally, Nikki ended up denying the entire allegation.
There was no rape. She'd made it up.
Why had she lied? According to Nikki, the truth was she had a new boyfriend, her first in one regard.
He was just my first person sexual-wise, so he brought me into a whole new world of emotions that I was unaware of. He was my world at that time.
Afraid she was pregnant, Nikki told police she'd cooked up the rape story to protect her boyfriend and her parents.
I didn't want to hurt them, being raised up in a church family, and I didn't want them to think that they had did anything wrong or raised me wrong.
Nikki wasn't pregnant, but to her church-going mother, that was little consolation for the news that her 16-year-old was sexually active.
That was really upsetting to Billie.
She was very angry with me. I basically threw my morals aside.
And just whom Billie Jean wanted to know had her daughter sacrificed her principles for. According to Nikki, he was a 16-year-old classmate named Carlos Infante.
I was in American history class with him, and we started by just hanging out in that class, getting to know each other, and then one thing led to another.
Had Carlos led Nikki astray? Her parents seemed to think so.
They disliked me being with him. They saw it as bringing me down.
Determined to get Nikki back on the straight and narrow, Billie Jean insisted she spend less time with Carlos and more time at church.
She thought the good kids were there at the church, that this would probably be a good influence on her to get in with a better group of kids.
But the more Billie Jean dragged her daughter to church, the more Nikki resisted.
I knew that the way I was living and everything was not right in God's eyes, but I didn't really want to hear all that.
Nikki also started to skip class. Soon her grades plummeted. By her junior year in high school, Robert and Billie Jean barely recognized the person their daughter had become.
Something just went wrong. You have a great kid, soft-spoken, seemed to me happy-go-lucky, and then she was making the bedroom dark, changing her music that she listened to. Just everything was opposite of what Nikki normally was.
I slept a lot, stayed in my room a lot, did not go out with the family. Nothing really held my interest.
Nothing, that is, but Carlos Infante.
After I became sexually involved with Carlos, my intensity level with him became like an obsession. Everything revolved around Carlos. I had pictures of him everywhere in the room. Every waking minute had to do with Carlos.
And she filled her diary with everything from confessions to poetry, all about Carlos.
She was in a situation where it was her first relationship where she'd been involved in sexual activity with anybody. So as a result of that, she, during that period of time, began to display behaviors she didn't display before.
Robert and Billie Jean were troubled by Nikki's new behavior and her new boyfriend.
I think they acted like any parent that loves their child and sees their child failing in their grades and in their classes. They were concerned.
Billie had said that, he wasn't making good grades, he wasn't a good influence on Nikki, and she was worried that he was coming over every day.
Billie Jean did more than just worry. After years of permissive parenting, she suddenly started telling her daughter no. And Nikki took her mother's new approach more like a toddler than a teenager.
Nikki would go off on these tantrums, these screaming, yelling, like fits.
It was very wearing on Billie, and she just about had it, and she said she found herself screaming at Nikki all the time.
Billie Jean screamed in vain. Nikki remained determined to see Carlos, no matter what.
She would sneak out of her room at night when everybody went to sleep.
And the more her daughter disobeyed, the more exasperated Billie Jean became.
Billie Jean told me, don't be surprised one day if you come home and there's police cars and fire trucks up and down the street, because I don't know if it's going to be me or Nikki, but one of us is going to be gone.
On May 14, 1997, Billie Jean received a phone call from the counselor at Nikki's high school. There was trouble with Nikki and Carlos.
The school counselor got involved with it, and the school counselor called Mom.
The meeting Billie Jean had with the school counselor that afternoon was brief, just long enough for the counselor to request that Billie Jean, Robert, and Nikki come in for a full session the following morning. The counselor explained that Nikki and Carlos had more than just the typical high school trouble to worry about. Nikki had confessed to the counselor that she was pregnant with Carlos's baby. Of course, considering Nikki had already lied about being raped, Billie Jean had reason to doubt her daughter's pregnancy. And there was a surefire way to find out.
Mom took her to the drugstore. They went and got a pregnancy test.
The test was negative, but the news didn't do much to soften Billie Jean's disappointment.
She was very upset, crying a lot. She was very angry with me.
While her mother raged, Nikki placed a call to Carlos to tell him the news.
I had decided to do that on my own, for one, wanting to see his reaction.
But she hadn't been on the phone long when her mother interrupted. Even though they had an appointment with the school counselor the next morning, Billie Jean wanted to consult a higher power.
Billie was adamant about her seeing the church counselor.
Billie Jean drove Nikki to the church. There, while mother and daughter waited to see the counselor, Nikki had a few brief words with her pastor, Herschel Kreisman.
She was having some boyfriend problems. I was there to be supportive to her.
The counseling session that followed wasn't so supportive, however.
The counselor, she started to raise her voice and tell me that my mom didn't deserve this, and it offended me. I got up, removed myself from her office, went outside into the parking lot, even contemplating running away at that time.
But Nikki didn't run away. Instead, she went back upstairs to the counselor's office and apologized to her mother. But was it the end of the fight? Or had she decided to take a new approach? At 7:07 p.m. on the evening of May 14th, barely an hour after returning home from her short session with the church counselor, Nikki Reynolds picked up the phone and dialed 911.
911, do you have an emergency? I just killed my mother. You just killed your mother? Yes, I did.
When police arrived moments later, they found Nikki waiting on her doorstep.
She had blood all over her, blood on her legs, blood on her face.
Coming up, in the interrogation room, Nikki reveals the disturbing truth behind her mother's death.
I told her everything. I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to kill you.
At just after 7 p.m. on May 14, 1997, Coral Springs police and EMT vehicles were lined up outside the home of 17-year-old Nikki Reynolds. Minutes earlier, the teen had dialed 911 and confessed to committing a crime of unimaginable horror.
I stabbed her repeatedly in the back. There's blood over her and all over the floor.
A teenage girl confessing to stabbing someone over and over was shocking enough. But what most astounded investigators was the identity of her victim.
She had killed her mother. I don't know anybody that just can fathom killing their own mother.
Nikki was handcuffed and put into the back of a police car.
The police officer at the scene had turned on a tape recorder and left it on the seat. She had been taped talking to herself.
I was praying the entire time I was in that cop car.
Oh, God. Please be alive. Please. Oh, please be alive, God. I've learned my lesson so bad.
And Nikki was still praying moments later when the paramedics arrived.
I remember seeing them bring her out on a stretcher with the IV attached to her, and I remember thinking in my head, okay, she's not covered up. And I remember actually feeling a lot of hope.
Nikki's hopes and prayers were no use. Stabbed 13 times, Billie Jean Reynolds was pronounced dead at 8:10 p.m.
She died by bleeding to death because there were so many stab wounds.
Nikki was transported to the Coral Springs Police Department. Moments later, her father arrived home from church to find his house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape.
The father just completely broke down and collapsed right there on the street. He couldn't believe that his wife was gone. And he couldn't believe that his daughter did this.
And this homicide had been particularly brutal, if the scene inside the house was any indication.
There was blood all over the place inside the house.
The mother tried to get away from her. It was just a trail of blood.
There had been no escape. The blood trail traced Billie Jean Reynolds' harrowing death, dragging herself across the floor as she was stabbed again and again.
A knife was in the sink. It was like a kitchen knife and had some blood on it.
In the kitchen, not far from where they'd found the knife, police found evidence that someone had attempted to clean up the crime scene.
On the countertop, there was a couple bloody towels and dish rags that looked like somebody had been smearing, trying to wipe blood up off the floor.
While police worked the crime scene, detectives at the Coral Springs Police Department questioned Nikki about the murder. And they didn't have to press too hard for answers.
I had no intentions of lying. I didn't have any secrets. I wanted to get it out.
It was so simple because she just chatted away. All I had to ask her was, Nikki, what happened today? Can you describe to me what happened? And she just went through the whole story from A to B.
It was a story that, according to Nikki, centered on her boyfriend, Carlos Infante. Nikki said it all began that afternoon when the school counselor called her mother.
Mom came there to the school. That's when Mom found out that she was pregnant.
At least that's what Nikki had told Carlos.
There would be times when Carlos would break up with me, and I would claim to be pregnant, and he would stay with me. I lied to him, so then I figured I couldn't live without him.
But that afternoon, she'd called Carlos from home and told him the truth. There was no baby.
That's when he got all mad at me. He did not want anything to do with me anymore because of all the lies.
Then, according to Nikki, an extraordinary thing happened. Billie Jean Reynolds had gotten on the phone with Carlos.
She apologized to him for having me put him through all the stuff I put him through.
For his part, Carlos had made it clear that he was only angry with Nikki, not Billie Jean.
He was apologizing to her for all the drama and everything.
But the drama had been far from over. Nikki told police that after she got off the phone with Carlos, she had decided to kill someone.
I took a glass jar full of cotton balls, emptied out the cotton balls, filled it with water, and took out an aspirin bottle out of my parents' medicine cabinet and started to shove as many pills as I could in my hand and just kept swallowing it.
Expecting death at any moment, she'd accompanied her mother to the counseling session at Coral Springs Baptist Church.
When she took me to see the lady for the first time, I had already overdosed and thought that I was going to be dead that day.
But when the overdose seemed to have no effect, Nikki told detectives that her thoughts turned from suicide to homicide. But the intended victim wasn't her mother.
The thoughts started changing that if I get to school to Carlos the very next day, then I can most likely kill him. If I couldn't have him, no one could. Well, my plan to kill Carlos was to wait till he comes out of his first hour, come up behind him, and slit his throat.
There was, as Nikki told the detectives, one obstacle in the way: the meeting with her high school guidance counselor.
I was thinking, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I don't know after the meeting if they're going to say, well, take your daughter home.
To kill Carlos as planned, Nikki would have to skip the guidance meeting. But how?
I figured, well, I'll just wait till my parents are sleeping and then I'll slash their throats.
But the plan changed when her father left for church after supper that night, alone.
Her father was at church. Her mother decided not to go on that particular evening.
And Nikki wasn't going anywhere either.
My mom told me I was grounded for the rest of the night. She told me to just clean up the dishes.
According to Nikki, as she stood over the sink that night, she'd started plotting.
I started cleaning the dishes, and from there, the thoughts started changing. I figured this even makes it easier for me if I kill my mom and then clean up the mess and wait till my dad gets home. Then I'll kill him, and then I'll drive to school tomorrow, and then I'll kill Carlos. All logical thinking was out the door at this time. Whatever thought went through my head, that's what I acted on, not thinking of consequences.
The plan laid out. All she'd needed was opportunity. It had come, according to Nikki, not long after she finished the dishes.
I was acting up like I was cleaning the kitchen. My mom started working at the computer. It was what I tried.
In gory detail, Nikki walked the detectives through what had happened next.
She said she went to the kitchen, she pulled out a kitchen knife and she rubbed it along her finger to feel if it was sharp enough to do the job.
According to what Nikki told police, she hesitated once she had the knife in hand.
And the only time it started scaring me was when I was actually thinking about when I was cleaning up the kitchen to kill my mom, and I had the knife, I was shaking, everything like that. I didn't know what to do.
Her hesitation didn't last long.
I finally got the nerve to come up behind her, and I tried to slash her throat. And it didn't exactly cut. She started screaming, and she jumped up towards the laundry room. She's like, "No, Nikki, no."
That's when, according to Nikki, she struck.
I kept stabbing her and everything like that, and I told her, "I'm sorry, I have to kill you because I can't live without Carlos." I asked her why I was doing this. I asked her to help me stop, and I could not. I felt like I was watching it other than doing it.
But if she wanted to stop, why did she continue to stab her mother?
The thoughts that kept going through my head was, if you stop now, she's going to suffer. And if you love her, why would you let her suffer? Why wouldn't you hurry up and send her to God? I kept asking her, "Are you dying? Are you dying?" And I was crying because I felt so bad. I couldn't believe what I was doing.
You were asking her, what are you, what?
Are you dying? Are you dying?
Eventually, Billie Jean ceased to struggle.
Her mother says the life is going out of me, and she said I stabbed her 3 or 4 more times until she stopped moving.
But, Nikki told detectives, Billie Jean offered her daughter forgiveness, even as she lay dying.
The last thing that really stands out to me is that she said that she just wanted me to get help and that she did love me.
Her mother's dying words, she explained to police, finally made her realize what she'd just done. And as the awful impact sank in, she'd panicked.
I felt in my mind that I can erase it. So I had attempted to basically start cleaning up the mess.
There was, however, one thing she couldn't erase, no matter how hard she tried.
When I had turned and saw her lying on the floor, it just felt like a huge smack in the face of almost like an awakening of reality. And immediately I picked up the phone.
911, do you have an emergency? I just killed my mother.
The confession caught on 911 tape was damning enough, even without the chilling details added by Nikki's interrogation.
It really kind of spoke for itself, the confession.
And although Nikki had just confessed to murder, her next confession would keep her from spending that night behind bars.
During the interview, Nikki said that she had ingested some aspirin, and I guess in an attempt to commit suicide.
I was very sick being from the pills, started throwing up, and then they took me from there to the emergency room.
But Nikki's short hospital stint didn't mean she was off the hook.
I was at the hospital with her for quite a while, stood post by her until the doctors would release her to go to the county jail.
Later that night, Nikki was formally booked on first-degree murder charges.
It's almost like Monopoly, you know, go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Coming up, could Nikki's suicide attempt amount to a get-out-of-jail-free card?
Aspirin has a significant potential for causing metabolic derangement.
On April 14, 1999, 19-year-old Nikki Reynolds was escorted into a Fort Lauderdale courtroom to stand trial for murder.
Her face just looked like a baby. She was just so young to be accused of what she had been accused of.
Nikki had spent almost 2 years in a juvenile correctional facility awaiting trial, and what she was accused of was horrendous.
She stabbed her mother to death. Stabbed her many, many times, not just one time.
The defendant stops and then says, "Are you dying yet? Are you dying yet?" And her mother says, "Yes, I feel the life fading out of me."
If convicted of the crime, Nikki faced life in prison. But why would the baby-faced teen commit such a heinous act? The answer, according to the prosecutor's opening statement, centered around a boy named Carlos Infante.
She just wanted to be with him, that's all there was to it.
That didn't mean he'd been involved, however. The prosecution pointed out that Carlos not only had an alibi, he was also one of the 3 people Nikki had set out to kill on the night of May 14, 1997.
She had it all planned out. Mom was first, and she was going to go on to Dad next, and then her boyfriend.
In their open, Nikki's defense team didn't dispute the state's charge that their client had committed the crime, but they argued that Nikki was innocent by reason of insanity.
Insanity made perfect sense to me because of how I felt, being that I couldn't believe it happened.
It seemed pretty clear that Nikki had done something that was quite out of character for her. It did seem to me as though there was a really strong case for insanity.
But was the case strong enough for Nikki to escape life in prison?
The definition of insanity is very strict. You have to suffer from a major mental disorder, and you have to not know that what you were doing was wrong, not know the consequences of it, not know the nature of it.
Did Nikki know what she was doing when she plunged a knife into her mother 13 times? The answer, according to the psychologist who testified for the prosecution, was yes.
She was a confused girl. very conflicted, had some personality problems, but under the definition of the law, she did not meet the legal criteria for insanity.
Nikki, according to the prosecution, had knowingly committed murder. The proof, they claimed, was in the statement she gave to police just hours after killing her mother. On April 15th, prosecutors called the detectives who'd taken Nikki's statement to the stand.
Nikki Reynolds knew exactly what she was doing. I always thought it was premeditated because she thought about how she was going to do it.
Jurors didn't have to take the detective's word for it either. Nikki's entire interrogation had been captured on tape.
Figured to see if it makes it easier for me if I kill my mom and then clean up the mess and wait till my dad gets home, then I'll kill him, and then I'll drive to school tomorrow, and then I'll kill Carlos.
She walked her way through the whole incident, her plans on how she did it.
And the planning, according to the prosecution, started hours before Billie Jean's death. As proof, prosecutors called Nikki's pastor, Herschel Kreisman, to testify.
The pastor testified that he had spoken with Nikki several hours before the murder.
They'd spoken on the afternoon of May 14th, 1997, when Billie Jean brought her daughter in to see the church counselor.
She asked him, "Can I still go to heaven if I've done something bad?"
Had it been a veiled reference to the horrible crime Nikki was hours away from committing? Not according to Nikki's defense attorney. He argued that there was a perfectly rational answer for his client's statement.
I felt like I was going to die from the overdose.
And the same religious upbringing that led Nikki to consider suicide a mortal sin was front and center when the defense started presenting its case on April 26th.
The rest of her life wasn't spent stabbing people, hitting people with sticks, running around with guns.
Nikki was a sweet girl, very soft-spoken, very quiet, always smiling, saying hello. Before Billie was killed, something happened. Something snapped.
But what had caused Nikki's sudden change from a good girl to a killer? Her defense team argued that underneath Nikki's sweet exterior was a mental illness that had finally surfaced with tragic results.
The defense was trying to show that she could not appreciate the wrongness of what she was doing.
I couldn't understand, even though I had committed a violent crime. I still want to sit here and say I'm not this violent person. I don't understand it just as much as anybody else doesn't understand it.
To bolster their case, Nikki's defense attorney called in psychiatric experts to testify that Nikki suffered from borderline personality disorder.
Individuals with borderline personality disorders can adore and idealize the person that they're with and then very quickly snap into one of feeling rejected and overwhelmed with extreme rage and anger.
Could Nikki's breakup with Carlos Infante have sent her spiraling out of control?
They certainly were presenting that she had snapped at the time, that something had happened to her that caused her to do something temporarily that she would not ordinarily have done.
It all has to do biologically with what I struggle with mental illnesses, borderline personality disorder.
At the time of the actual event, I do not believe that her brain was functioning normally.
But Nikki's personality disorder wasn't all the defense claimed as the cause of Billie Jean's death. There was also the aspirin.
Aspirin has a significant potential for causing metabolic derangements within the body. The overdose of the aspirin caused her to have a mini psychotic episode.
Under what her attorneys claimed was the aspirin's mind-altering influence, Nikki may have planned out a series of murders. But the defense also reminded jurors that it was the horrible aftermath of the first killing that had shocked the teenager to her senses.
She got snapped back to reality when she saw her mother's body.
That's what the defense claimed, at least. But on April 29th, it would be up to the jury to decide not whether or not Nikki committed murder, but whether her alleged insanity was enough to excuse it.
Nobody was denying what took place here. Nobody was denying how horrific it was. Her sanity was the only issue that was at stake.
Coming up, the jury retires to consider a verdict. But would its decision mark the end of this case, or just the beginning?
Do you acknowledge being the biological mother of the defendant in this case, Jacqueline Nicole Reynolds?
Yes, I am.
On May 3, 1999, 19-year-old Nikki Reynolds sat in a Broward County courtroom facing an uncertain future. Charged with the first-degree murder of her adoptive mother, her only chance to avoid a lengthy prison sentence rested on one thing.
The central question wasn't whether or not she did it. The central question was whether or not she was sane when she did it.
Nikki's defense attorney had argued that his client wasn't. But would a jury agree?
That's a very difficult thing for a juror who's a layman to be able to say, well, can somebody so disassociate themselves that they don't know right from wrong?
Just how difficult became clear on May 3rd when jurors sent a note to the presiding judge. They were hopelessly deadlocked, 6 in favor and 6 against a conviction.
The judge asked them to go back in and make a decision once again.
It was no use.
You had 2 mental health professionals on the defense saying she was insane, and 2 doctors for the state saying she was not insane. What the jury did was they compared the 2 and said, we need a tiebreaker.
The showdown came 6 months later, when both sides reconvened for a second trial in the same Florida courtroom on November 1st, 1999. As they had in the first trial, prosecutors contended that Nikki Reynolds fully intended to kill her mother when she'd picked up the knife on the evening of May 14th, 1997.
That's a day that when the voice of Billie Jean Reynolds was silenced prematurely, but forever silenced. Her voice was silenced by none other than her daughter, Jacqueline Nicole Reynolds.
Next, hoping to defuse Nikki's insanity defense, prosecutors once again called a series of psychologists to the stand. And each expert repeated the previous argument that while hardly a rational act, killing her mother didn't automatically prove Nikki was insane.
In this case, you have an individual who clearly showed her ability to discriminate wrongfulness by looking at the situation, thinking about it, and even testing ahead of time the knife to see whether or not it was sharp enough.
She knew what she was doing. She knew she was stabbing her mother. She knew that she was killing her mother, and she knew that that was wrong.
And Nikki, according to prosecutors, did more than just weigh right and wrong before picking up the knife. They claimed her mother's death was clearly premeditated.
It wasn't a rash, impulsive behavior where her and her mother get into an argument. She's so upset, she just pulls out a knife and starts to stab her. I mean, she planned the timing of it, and she planned what was going to happen after it.
As in the first trial, the defense countered by arguing that Nikki was indeed mentally ill. And like the prosecution, the defense called experts to testify as to Nikki's sanity or lack of it.
We don't even know whether she fully understood when she was attacking this person, whether in her mind this person was really her loving mother, or whether this person was now the enemy.
In my head, it basically told me if you kill your mom, then you can still get to Carlos, not thinking this is my mom that loves me and wants me.
Although, as the defense reminded jurors, Billie Jean Reynolds wasn't Nikki's biological mother. It was the setup for a new witness, someone who hadn't testified in Nikki's first trial. Someone, in fact, Nikki hadn't seen since she was 3 months old.
Do you acknowledge being the biological mother of the defendant in this case, Jacqueline Nicole Reynolds?
Yes, I am. My attorney contacted a private investigator who contacted the adoption agency I was adopted from, and from there they found her.
The defense hadn't marched Katrina Ramos into the courtroom for a family reunion, however. She was there to establish beyond a doubt that Nikki did indeed suffer from mental illness. The proof, according to the defense, lay within Ramos's own well-documented psychiatric history.
She suffered from mental illness, a long history of mental illness.
Katrina Ramos also admitted to a history of family violence. Although in her case, the target wasn't her mother. It had been her unborn child, the child now on trial for murder.
Her mother testified that during her pregnancy, she repeatedly tried to induce a miscarriage. She punched herself in the stomach. She fell on her stomach. She was trying to lose this baby.
Nikki appeared shaken by the news.
Nikki was fighting back tears when her mother was testifying about her efforts to get rid of Nikki when she was pregnant with her.
Did the same mental illness that drove Nikki's birth mother to try to abort her unborn child lead to Billie Jean's death?
To understand what type of illness someone may have, you just have to shake the family tree and see what falls out.
The mother did have similar psychiatric issues as those that Nikki had.
It's all the same line of behaviors, and that was important for our defense.
And according to that defense, it was the anxiety over losing Carlos that pushed Nikki's borderline personality disorder into psychosis.
At the time of the crime, she had lost touch with reality and she was experiencing problems with her thinking. She thought that she had to kill her mother and her father because they were going to prevent her from killing Carlos the next day at school.
Why did you find that to be evidence, if you did, of psychosis or psychotic-like features?
Because it doesn't really make any long-term sense. It's not necessary for her to kill her parents in order to kill Carlos, as crazy as killing Carlos is.
But did that prove Nikki was truly insane? The prosecutors didn't think so. In their closing arguments on November 17th, they hammered that point home by playing Nikki's own words from her 911 tape.
I can't believe I did this to her. Okay, Nikki, everything's going to be okay, all right? It is not. I'm going to put an electric chair.
She was confused. She wasn't thinking logically, but she wasn't irrational.
In fact, mere hours after the killing, during her interrogation, Nikki was rational enough to start offering up excuses. It was the same excuse prosecutors reminded the jury that her attorneys had spent the last several days presenting.
This has never happened before. That's why I think I need to. I don't know. What do they do when you plead insanity?
Coming up, will her biological mother's history convince jurors that Nikki also suffered from mental illness? Or will they see Nikki's insanity plea as a cold, calculated act? On November 19, 1999, 20-year-old Nikki Reynolds sat in a Fort Lauderdale, Florida courtroom awaiting a verdict in her second murder trial.
The thoughts that kept going through my head waiting for the verdict was basically trusting in the Lord and knowing it was in His hands.
One jury had already tried and failed to reach a verdict. Would a second?
Mr. Foreperson, have you arrived at a verdict?
Yes, sir, we have.
The trial offered jurors a choice between two mothers. The biological one the defense claimed had passed her mental illness on to her daughter, and the one who'd adopted Nikki as an infant. Could one cancel out the other? And if so, which?
We, the jury, finds as follows as to the indictment of this defendant in this case. Defendant is guilty of the lesser included crime of murder in the second degree.
To find somebody guilty of second-degree murder, there has to be ill will or like hatred towards the victim. And I remember my reaction being very upset when I was found guilty. There's no evidence of hate towards my mother or that I wanted her dead. There's no evidence of that.
At her sentencing hearing on January 7, 2000, Nikki's biological mother, Katrina Ramos, made a passionate plea on behalf of her 20-year-old daughter.
I am asking you to consider treatment as a part of Nikki's sentencing. I believe that Nikki can turn her life around as well and be a productive member of society.
Then, for the very first time, Nikki addressed the court.
I don't know what happened. I didn't mean to hurt any of you. And whether you believe me or not, I swear to God, I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't mean to tear the family apart.
I made a statement asking them to forgive me and understand that I did not mean this and I did not hate my mom or any of my family for that matter, not even Carlos.
Next, Nikki begged the judge to sentence her to a psychiatric hospital in lieu of prison.
Things like this don't just happen, and I believe that there's something has to be wrong. And if it was not insanity, something was wrong that day.
Although the way the judge saw it, the horrible wrong Nikki had committed outweighed all else. That afternoon, he gave Nikki the maximum sentence under Florida law, 34 years in prison.
A child who could have had a nice full life and enjoyed her life with her family now will always look back and realize she's got a shattered family.
And for Nikki, losing her family, not losing Carlos, was the ultimate price.
These are the consequences of my crime. I just want people to learn from my experience. Teenagers and then maybe other kids that struggle with codependency or feeling like their boyfriend is their life and they can't go on, that of course that's not true.
A prison nurse falls in love with a smooth-talking felon.
For Jennifer Hyatt, George Hyatt was Prince Charming.
She was like a teenage girl in love with an older boy.
But when her soulmate turned abusive, the nurse became the prisoner, trapped in a bizarre relationship she couldn't break out of.
He would call me 24 hours a day. I had to sleep with the phone in my ear.
You could see him ratcheting up the pressure on her.
And the pressure would eventually push a desperate woman to do the unthinkable.
I had the gun in my hand, and the gun went off. And it shot him. Point blank.
On the morning of August 9, 2005, Jennifer Hyatt walked out of the Roane County Courthouse in Kingston, Tennessee, and got behind the wheel of her Ford Explorer. Her husband, incarcerated felon George Hyatt, had just pled guilty to an outstanding burglary charge, adding years to his already lengthy sentence.
He's just not going to get out anytime soon. He had no future ahead of him.
Jennifer and George had been married for less than 3 months. They'd never spent a moment alone as man and wife. Now it looked like they might never be together. But would that necessarily be a bad thing?
I think Jennifer was scared and in love all at the same time.
George tormented Jennifer, allegedly harassing her day and night over the phone and tracking her every move.
I had people watching me. He knew everything I did.
She did try to commit suicide because of the way he was treating her.
Now, on the morning of August 9th, Jennifer was prepared to do something even more drastic.
She was just vulnerable enough to believe that it was the only thing that she could do to save her own life.
At approximately 10 a.m., 2 prison guards were loading George into a prison van when Jennifer leveled a handgun at the 3 men.
They was trying to push George on into the van, and he hollered, "Shoot him."
But would she do her sadistic lover's bidding or end his abuse forever? George wasn't always Jennifer's torturer. In fact, at the beginning of their relationship, he was her protector. They met in 2004 at Tennessee's Northwest Community Correction Complex, where Jennifer worked as a nurse. It was her first job out of nursing school.
She decided to go into this nursing because she just enjoyed it, and I was very proud of her turning her life around.
Jennifer had arrived in Tennessee 3 years earlier. Originally from outside Salt Lake City, she'd fled Utah in an effort to escape from her first husband.
He got into the drugs. He went to crank and then to meth. And he got really bad on the meth.
And when her husband went to jail on drug charges in 1999, Jennifer filed for divorce and started over.
She wanted to just get the kids away from that whole scene. And so when she took the kids, she just went to Tennessee.
Settling in near friends in West Tennessee, the mother of 3 remarried and enrolled in a nursing program. As part of the program, Jennifer did a clinical rotation at a nearby prison. And she did more than just work in the hospital ward. The prison put Jennifer to work with its close security inmates.
They couldn't come out, like to Medline. They couldn't come out to get bandage changes and stuff. I had to go to the units and do this. So I was one-on-one all the time with them.
A guard always accompanied her. But for many of the inmates, it was as close to being alone with a woman as they could get.
She was getting harassed by a lot of the male prisoners.
There was a few that would always show themselves to me.
With the guard present, Jennifer wasn't in any real danger. But she soon became fed up with the constant flashing and lewd talk.
After a while, you're just like, okay, enough. You're men. Grow up.
One day, Jennifer recounts, a guard offered her a possible solution.
He's like, well, I know somebody here that could walk you around the different units and kind of protect you.
Jennifer expected a senior guard, someone who could command the inmates' respect. Instead, she says she got her first lesson in how life really works on the inside.
Inmates ran that place. It wasn't the officers. It wasn't. And I hate to say that, but it wasn't.
In fact, according to Jennifer, it wasn't just the inmates that ran the prison. It was one inmate in particular.
George Hyatt had manipulated the system. He had tried to get everything to work for him.
He's supposed to be a really smooth and slick talker.
A career criminal with convictions for burglary, armed robbery, and assault, George had been in and out of prison since he was a teen, and he wasn't always out on parole.
He had been charged several times with escape.
Serving a 35-year sentence for assaulting a guard, George's exploits had earned him respect and fear from his fellow inmates.
He became affiliated with a gang in prison. And he had that attitude of wanting to be intimidating, wanting to be that bully.
The other inmates were afraid of him. They wouldn't want to do anything to piss him off.
The sexual harassment stopped, and soon Jennifer started to suspect that her protector was more than just another inmate.
He would hand me $100, say, here, go do your hair, go do your makeup, go do your nails, go do something, go have fun.
Jennifer liked the cash, but she loved the way George made her feel.
He always made me feel special, like I was number one.
And it wasn't long before Jennifer found herself falling for George.
She was madly in love with George. They were going to be so happy.
He had me convinced that he was wrongly prosecuted. It was only a matter of time before he was free.
Even within the prison, however, there were limits to George's influence. In August of 2004, Jennifer lost her job after guards caught her smuggling contraband into George.
I got fired for bringing shrimp to him one day.
She was caught bringing in food into the prison for George. Well, that's a no-no.
And the shrimp had just been a tiny portion of what Jennifer fetched for George.
I brought him in $500 one time. I took him a cell phone one time.
George kept the phone hidden in his cell. Over the next 12 months, it would become the shackle that kept Jennifer chained to her convict boyfriend. Out of a job in the summer of 2004, Jennifer didn't think she'd hear from George again.
I'm like, he was probably just using me.
But George kept calling her. He sent her gifts and letters professing that he still loved her. He even asked Jennifer to marry him.
I believed him. I couldn't do anything for him, so what would be the motivation for him to lie to me?
Did George truly love Jennifer? Or was he plotting something far bigger than smuggling cell phones and shrimp? One thing was certain, he pulled out the stops when it came to convincing Jennifer he was sincere. In fact, George even showered Jennifer's family with gifts.
He would send me and my mother flowers, goodie baskets, and stuff like that.
But would a few bouquets and goodie baskets be enough to get Jennifer's family to overlook the fact that George was in prison?
He was very, very sweet. He was very nice.
And Jennifer? She filed for a divorce from her second husband in November of 2004 and devoted herself entirely to George.
He would call me 24 hours a day. I had to sleep with the phone in my ear. If I didn't, I was cussed and screamed and hollered at and called every name in the book.
She would fall asleep. He would scream and holler and threaten suicide and threaten to leave her if she didn't wake up and talk to him.
George also monitored every call Jennifer made.
I had to keep it on with an earpiece in my pocket so that he could hear every conversation I had.
And to keep the true nature of their abusive relationship secret, he took particular care to monitor what Jennifer said to her family.
She could not call a family member without him being on the phone to see what was being said.
So why didn't she just hang up?
She had been taken advantage of by men most of her life, and I think George Hyatt saw her coming from a mile away.
She's easily manipulated. I think Jennifer was scared and in love all at the same time.
On May 21st, 2005, Jennifer and George wed in the visitor center at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution.
It took about 15-20 minutes, and I had to leave.
And the next time the newlyweds met face to face, gunfire would soon follow. In June of 2005, Jennifer sent her kids home to Utah and took a new job as a live-in nurse for a woman named Betty Dye.
She was my husband's nurse, and she was real good to him, very attentive.
And how did Jennifer explain her absent boyfriend who was always on the phone? It was easy.
I thought he was a soldier in Iraq.
For Jennifer, however, her one-time protector had become a torturer. She started taking medication for anxiety and depression and thought increasingly of suicide.
She just thought she would be better off not around.
And on the night of June 24th, 2005, Jennifer decided to act. She unscrewed the cap on her medication and poured pills out by the handful.
I just decided to take them. Took it all. Like 15,000 milligrams of Elavil. And George called me, like, as I was taking the last of them. He heard, I guess, the pill bottle or whatever.
Over the phone, Jennifer told George that she had taken the pills.
He freaked out. Go to the hospital, go to the hospital, go to the hospital. And I finally got tired of hearing it, so I got in the truck and I left.
While Jennifer drove, George called the hospital. Emergency room staff found Jennifer in the parking lot, passed out in her truck.
She was in a coma for a couple of days on a respirator.
They had told Miss Betty to call my family because I wouldn't make it another 24 hours.
Jennifer survived. But what would she do when she woke up? Would she finally call the police and inform them of George's abuse? Or would she decide on something more drastic than suicide to escape the nightmare she was living? On the morning of August 9th, 2005, 2 weeks after the suicide attempt, 2 prison guards led a shackled George Hyatt across the courthouse parking lot in Kingston, Tennessee.
He was getting ready to face new charges in Roane County.
For George, each court appearance was a brief taste of freedom.
In some courthouses, the jail is attached to the courthouse. That is not the case in Kingston. So if they're walking somebody in, that's an inmate, they have to walk them right through that parking lot.
But that morning, as the guards walked George to the corrections van that was supposed to take him back to prison, a Ford Explorer pulled into the parking lot. It was Jennifer.
I pulled up behind the van, and I got out of the truck. I had the gun in my hand.
Coming up, Jennifer's desperate act leaves one man dead. But which man?
She fired one fatal shot.
On the morning of August 9th, 2005, prison guards Wayne Cotton Morgan and Larry Porky Harris were loading incarcerated felon George Hyatt into a Tennessee corrections van when a Ford Explorer squealed to a stop behind them. George's wife, Jennifer Hyatt, stepped out of the truck and leveled a 9mm handgun at the three men. George's psychological abuse had driven her to attempt suicide just weeks before, and now it was about to drive Jennifer to something worse.
I said, "Hey guys." One of them turned around and looked at me, and he said, "Go away." And that's when George yelled, "Shoot him."
She fired one fatal shot.
She didn't, however, shoot her abusive husband. She did exactly as he told her. The failure of her suicide attempt, according to Jennifer, had finally broken what little will she'd had to resist.
After that week in the hospital, I realized I couldn't fight anymore.
He used and abused her. Jennifer Hyatt was brainwashed in the classic sense.
Bullied into obeying his every command, Jennifer had spent the 2 weeks since the suicide attempt on the phone with George, planning the escape attempt.
I was supposed to hold the gun on him. He was going to grab their guns, and we were supposed to put them in the van and then just drive away.
But that morning, the plan changed.
And that's when George yelled, "Shoot him." Cotton Morgan turned around and he grabbed the gun. And it scared me.
Struck in the abdomen by Jennifer's first shot, Officer Morgan fell to the ground. Then, as bystanders dove for cover, Jennifer unloaded her weapon at Officer Porky Harris.
Porky starts shooting back.
There was a gun battle right there in the parking lot.
Jennifer ran back to the Explorer. George Hyatt bolted from the prison van and tried to escape through the intense gunfire.
He's bound at the ankles, but he was able to scurry, basically, across the parking lot.
As Jennifer pulled away, Officer Harris continued firing.
The other officer emptied his duty weapon, and then was able to get Cotton's weapon and empty it.
He shot the front of the truck trying to hit the tires.
He failed. The Explorer pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into the traffic.
It happened so fast, a minute and a half.
Police and emergency personnel were on the scene in minutes. Cotton Morgan was airlifted to the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville, but it was too late.
The in-flight nurse told me at UT that for all intents and purposes, Dad was gone when they got him on the helicopter.
Back in Kingston, the town was in a state of siege. Schools were locked down, streets closed, law enforcement blanketed the town.
The next thing you know, there's TBI there, there's FBI, helicopters, dogs.
Within probably an hour and a half, there was probably 350 officers here to help search.
Police soon found Jennifer's Explorer a few blocks away behind a Subway restaurant. And they discovered that Porky Harris's shots at the fleeing Explorer hadn't been entirely in vain.
They found bullet holes in it.
There was blood, too, but there was no sign of the fugitives. However, a Kingston fireman who lived across the street did give police a solid description of the Hyatt's getaway vehicle, a gold Chevy minivan.
He had remembered a van backing in there that night prior to the incident.
Where the fugitives had gone, however, was anyone's guess.
You are near I-40 and very close to I-75 split. So at that time, we had our hands full trying to get a direction.
As authorities launched a nationwide manhunt, the media pounced on the story.
U.S. Marshals were all over on alert looking for them. There was a lot of appeal from the media.
And considering a young woman had just broken her incarcerated lover out of jail amidst a blaze of gunfire, it wasn't long before the press made the obvious comparison.
It was like a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde, the escape, the daring escape, the disregard for human life, the shooting right there in public.
As news outlets ran with the breaking story, police back in Kingston tried to piece together the morning's events. According to what Officer Harris told his superiors, Jennifer had met with George briefly that morning, shortly after he'd arrived for his hearing.
Cotton Morgan had gone out of his way to be helpful to Jennifer and George Hyatt, allowing them some privacy to decide what to do on George Hyatt's case.
Or had they been plotting his escape? One thing was certain, the ensuing shootout had been captured on the courthouse security cameras.
In the video, you can see a vehicle pull up just behind the van and stay there for just a few seconds and then flee off.
By the end of the day, that gun battle remained the last confirmed sighting of the fugitives. But the media attention was already generating a flood of leads. People were seeing the Hyatts everywhere.
We had hundreds of tips coming in. Yes, I've seen this vehicle, it's here.
Most of the tips turned out to be dead ends.
Well, how many vans like that one are they on the interstate?
But would the police eventually find and stop the right one? The one that was, at that moment, racing north on I-75. Inside the van, Jennifer was putting all of her nursing skills to work on herself. Shot during the escape attempt, it was her blood that the authorities had found in the ditched Explorer.
The officer shot the truck several times. One came in the back window and through my seat and grazed me.
And as the fugitives raced north, Jennifer did what she could to stop the bleeding.
My whole left leg was soaked. I had shirts wrapped around my leg.
George, behind the wheel, apparently had no intention of stopping or seeking help for his wounded bride.
He really didn't seem too concerned. He just kept driving. Said we had to get out of Tennessee.
Fleeing Tennessee, they were across Kentucky and almost in Ohio, just across the river from Cincinnati, when Jennifer told George she couldn't go on.
I says, we've got to stop. I can't go anymore.
They went up I-75, spent the night in Erlanger, Kentucky. At that point, that's where they get rid of the gun.
George's shackles weren't quite so easy to get rid of, however.
We stopped at a Lowe's because we needed some way to get his shackles off.
There was only one problem. With Jennifer's legs soaked in blood and George's legs clapped in irons, there was no way they could go into the store. So George, thinking fast, pulled into the store's loading area.
The van that we were in had a handicap sticker. And so one of the ladies came out that worked at Lowe's and asked if we needed anything.
George requested a hacksaw. Within an hour, the couple was checking into an Erlanger Econo Lodge. There, with his legs finally free, George's thoughts turned to his bride. It was, after all, their first night together as man and wife.
All he was interested in was sex. I hadn't even gotten bleeding stopped, and that's what he wanted. He didn't care. He just said, put a towel on it.
After consummating their marriage, the fugitives settled down for the evening.
He ordered pizza. I passed out.
When she awoke a few hours later, she discovered that George had been busy.
He had cut all my hair off and told me that I had to dye it black.
George had reason. Their motel TV was buzzing with news bulletins about the modern-day Bonnie and Clyde. And it was only then that Jennifer realized they were wanted for more than just a jailbreak.
When I found out the officer died, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I didn't know he had died. I had no clue. And I asked George, I said, does he have family? Did you know him? What have I done?
And what would happen to Jennifer and her husband if the police caught up to them? The sun had barely come up the next morning when federal marshals and local police surrounded the Erlanger Econo Lodge. Overnight, witnesses had spotted the fugitives' minivan parked outside.
They narrowed it down to, hey, yeah, this is a vehicle. We know it's them.
But when the officers stormed the room, all they found were blood-soaked towels, a set of handcuffs and shackles, a hacksaw, and a few personal items. In a dumpster outside, police found a 9mm pistol. And when investigators ran the plates on the gold van parked nearby, they discovered that it belonged to Jennifer's employer, Betty Dye.
The grandchildren saw my van on TV, and then the TBI and FBI moved in.
That evening, TBI agents discovered that the Dyes had unwittingly aided in the escape plan.
It was a pretty elaborate scheme. It was a lot of work that she put into putting these vehicles in place.
Jennifer had convinced Mrs. Dye to loan her the gold minivan.
She told me that George was going to lose his daughter if she didn't go to court and testify for him because he was in Iraq.
Jennifer, of course, had driven the van to Kingston, collected the Explorer, and launched her escape plan. And now she and George were on the run. But where? As the sun went down on August 10th, authorities were trying to get a fix on the fugitives. Were George and Jennifer still in Erlanger, or had they fled in another stashed getaway car? That evening, the authorities in Cincinnati received a promising lead.
There was a cab driver who brought a couple matching the description to a hotel.
Unfortunately, it wasn't until hours after dropping them off that the Cincinnati cab driver made the connection.
He turned the news on and said, that's the couple that I took to the hotel, to Columbus.
The cab driver explained that he'd picked up the Hyatts at their motel in Erlanger, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, and driven them all the way to a second hotel in Columbus.
Cincinnati is not close to Columbus. It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes between the two cities.
The cab driver explained to police that the Hyatts told him they had been in a car wreck and that they needed to get to Columbus for an Amway conference.
They said they were with Amway and they were doing some things up in Columbus with a conference.
Acting on the tip, the U.S. Marshals and the Columbus SWAT moved quickly into position.
We had the whole place surrounded. There was nowhere they could have gone.
Coming up, would the Hyatts surrender peacefully, or would the modern-day Bonnie and Clyde live up to their notorious namesakes?
You have no idea what to expect on the other side of that door.
On the evening of August 10th, Jennifer Hyatt awoke from a fretful sleep in room 236B of the America's Best Value Inn in Columbus, Ohio.
I had fallen asleep for a little while, and when I woke up, I guess I'd been dreaming about what had happened. And the first thing out of my mouth was, they're going to give me the death penalty for this.
A little over 24 hours earlier, she'd blasted her husband George out of jail. In the process, she'd shot and killed corrections officer Wayne Cotton Morgan.
I never planned on shooting anybody. It was just supposed to be a scare tactic.
George, still savoring his first full day of freedom, shrugged off their predicament.
He's like, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
Moments later, the phone rang.
I figured it was front desk saying, we're going to send up towels now.
A female voice answered, and I just stated, Jennifer? She said yes.
U.S. Marshal Nikki Ralston flashed a thumbs up to the U.S. Marshals poised outside the Hyatt's room.
I was actually kind of shocked. If I was on the run, I was in a hotel room and the phone rang, I probably would not have answered the phone.
Ralston told Jennifer that she was surrounded by law enforcement.
I said, you need to get George, you need to lay the phone down, and you need to walk outside with your hands held high.
A tense moment followed, the Marshals and Columbus SWAT ready to open fire at the slightest sign of trouble.
I could hear her set the phone down. I heard some faint whispering.
George asked me, he goes, who is it? I said, the U.S. Marshals, we need to come out.
Jennifer and George's blood-soaked honeymoon had started with a shootout. Would it end in another? After a day and a half on the run, Jennifer and George gave themselves up.
I walked out the door, and they told me to face them and walk towards them. And when I got to them, they put those zip cord cuffs on.
The Marshals also cuffed George and quickly whisked him off to jail. But Jennifer wouldn't follow just yet.
They called EMTs in, and the EMT says, we want her to go to the hospital. They wanted to make sure there was no bullets in my leg.
Handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser, bloody and under arrest for murder, Jennifer's first thoughts were of George.
She immediately went into, is George okay? What's going to happen to George? She didn't care much about herself. It was all about George.
She didn't even want to go to the hospital. She only wanted to be with George.
Jennifer was treated for her wounds, then transferred to the Franklin County Jail. Questioned by the authorities, Jennifer took complete responsibility for Officer Morgan's death.
She says she did it because she loved him.
Jennifer soon learned that Cotton Morgan might not be the only one to die because of her attempt to free George.
For shooting a corrections officer in cold blood, premeditated, she was looking at the death penalty.
Would prosecutors seek it? Without a doubt, if the public opinion back in Kingston was any indication.
The public was outraged by this crime. This was a killing that went to the core of this small town in East Tennessee.
The Hyatts weren't in East Tennessee, however. Before prosecutors could put George and Jennifer on trial, they'd have to get them back into the state. On the morning of August 12th, the fugitives appeared separately in an Ohio courtroom for their extradition hearings.
The Hyatts appeared in court the next day, Jennifer first, George second.
Well aware that Jennifer had confessed, her attorney knew that she faced an almost certain conviction upon returning to Tennessee for trial. His advice? Delay the inevitable.
My lawyer advised me to refuse extradition, so that's what I did.
We are requesting that a warrant be issued by the governor of the state of Tennessee.
Buying time for his client, Jennifer's attorney told the court that Tennessee's governor would have to file a formal extradition request before she would return to the state. Jennifer looked on in silence.
She just didn't know what to do, didn't know what she was doing, and had never been in this kind of situation before.
George, on the other hand, had been in and out of courtrooms his entire adult life.
He seemed to have disdain for everyone, the police, the witnesses.
And he wasn't afraid of facing a Tennessee jury.
I want to sign, Your Honor. I want to sign my extradition.
But when his attorney informed him that Jennifer was going to fight, George did an abrupt about-face.
I'm not going to leave her without her, but okay.
Like Bonnie and Clyde before them, George and Jennifer seemed determined to go down together. The same day Jennifer and George were in an Ohio courtroom, the people of Tennessee said goodbye to Officer Cotton Morgan.
It was one of the largest funerals in Morgan County. We had to have the funeral in the elementary school gymnasium. And I think it was over 2,000 people there.
That just sent chills up my back, just seeing that support.
3 weeks after Wayne Morgan was laid to rest, the town of Kingston showed a different sort of support. Tennessee's governor had signed the extradition warrant, and on August 22nd, U.S. Marshals took Jennifer and George Hyatt back to the very spot the corrections officer had been gunned down.
They brought them separately. They wouldn't tell us what time they were supposed to be there.
The Hyatts also arrived in unmarked cars, but the precautions didn't deter the angry crowd waiting for them at the courthouse.
There were people who lined the street and shouted at them.
And unlike the morning George escaped, there were far more than 2 guards on hand to escort the Hyatts across the parking lot.
Security was phenomenally tight. More police cruisers than the town of Kingston's probably ever seen.
Inside the courthouse, armed guards brought the Hyatts before the judge.
Both were shackled rather heavily.
But while the press had once compared the couple to Bonnie and Clyde, onlookers couldn't help but ask, was the quiet woman shackled next to George the same outlaw who broke her lover out of jail, killing a lawman in the process?
Jennifer, she seemed medicated when she came to court, honestly.
She didn't utter a word as the judge announced the charges against her and the possible outcome.
They had filed an intent to seek the death penalty.
After charges were filed, the Hyatts were remanded into custody. Bail was not an option.
Immediately after the hearing, they were sent to separate prisons.
With the fugitives finally locked away behind maximum security bars, the state of Tennessee began building a first-degree murder case against Jennifer Hyatt.
There was rock-solid evidence in this case against her.
The state had eyewitnesses, surveillance video, even a signed confession. But would it be enough to convince a jury to sentence a mother of 3 to death? Coming up, a jailhouse journal reveals the mind of a killer.
Whatever is in a prison cell, it does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
And the defense makes a desperate gamble to avoid a death sentence.
It was an unfair type of thing to put before us as a family.
In the fall of 2005, Jennifer Hyatt was back in a Tennessee penitentiary. But the former prison nurse wasn't working. She was awaiting trial. Jennifer had been charged with gunning down Tennessee Corrections Officer Wayne Cotton Morgan during a jailbreak to free her incarcerated husband, George Hyatt. Now, facing a possible death sentence, there appeared to be little hope for Jennifer, short of a second jailbreak.
There was no question that Jennifer Hyatt was the person who fired the gun that killed Cotton Morgan.
We had an eyewitness, we had the murder weapon, everything was strong about this case.
In fact, with a conviction almost a foregone conclusion, the ultimate decision in Jennifer and George's all but open and shut case wasn't in the hands of the jury. Instead, the fate of this modern-day Bonnie and Clyde ultimately rested with the family of the man they'd murdered. The state had already filed a death penalty case against the Hyatts, but when it came to actually pursuing it, the prosecutors passed the buck.
The Attorney General, they made it very plain that they sort of left it up to the family.
And that fall, the family had no doubts. Jennifer and George deserved death.
I don't know if it was just anger or whether it was just me wanting to see her die or pay for what she had done.
There was only one complication.
Any jury is very hesitant about taking the life of a woman, but even more importantly, taking the life of a mother of 3 young children. They can't separate the consequences that that decision will have on those children's lives for years to come.
In the end, everything would hinge on whether the jury saw Jennifer as a willing accomplice or a desperate woman at the end of her rope. Unfortunately for the defense, prosecutors had some damaging evidence that strongly suggested the former. And it came direct from Jennifer. Back in August, when Jennifer was extradited to Tennessee, she'd left a few things behind in her cell.
The jailers, as a routine procedure, searched her jail cell. At that point, they found a number of letters to different people, including George Hyatt, and also a journal that she had begun while she was in custody.
All I was allowed to have in there was paper and pencil. So that's what I did. I wrote. And I just basically wrote a life history.
The defense feared the writings would dispel any doubt that Jennifer was anything but a willing accomplice, starting with the words she'd scrawled across the top of her journal.
She had actually entitled it The Modern Day Bonnie and Clyde.
And the letters? Written to friends and family, Jennifer had signed each one with her new nickname, Bonnie.
That was, as you can imagine, not helpful to us.
Jennifer's attorneys fought to suppress the Bonnie and Clyde journal and her letters, claiming they'd been improperly seized.
They'd come and got me and took me down to booking. And the U.S. Marshals were down there. And I'm like, oh, am I leaving? They're like, yeah. I said, what about all my stuff in my cell? We'll send it to you. And I never got it.
Despite her attorney's protest, the judge ruled to allow Jennifer's letters and journal as evidence.
The law is pretty clear that whatever is in a prison cell, it does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Faced with overwhelming evidence and Jennifer's incriminating letters, the defense had only one hope for saving Jennifer's life.
We had asked for a plea bargain in April of '06, and it was denied. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
According to Jennifer's attorney, prosecutors denied the request due to tremendous pressure from Officer Morgan's family.
The family did not want to settle this case. They wanted to see the ultimate punishment.
To escape that punishment, the defense did the only thing they could do. They had their client start another journal of sorts, a detailed statement that portrayed Jennifer not as Bonnie Parker, but as an abused woman.
We wanted to convey that George Hyatt was the mastermind behind this entire incident, and that Jennifer Hyatt was a puppet under his control.
To back up their account, Jennifer's attorneys collected phone records to illustrate George's relentless surveillance and medical records chronicling Jennifer's suicide attempt.
You could see him ratcheting up the pressure on her to go through with his plans. And after her suicide attempt, I believe she was just vulnerable enough to believe that it was the only thing that she could do to save her own life.
I had basically given up trying to fight him.
And to cap things off, the defense sent a camera crew to Utah.
My lawyer had went out to Salt Lake and interviewed my mom and my kids and a couple of other family members.
Probably 15, 20 minutes long, talking with Jennifer Hyatt's children, just talking about what a death sentence would mean to them.
Pray that she don't get the death penalty.
Then, well aware whose hands held Jennifer's fate, her attorney sent the entire package to Officer Morgan's family.
It was an unfair type of thing to put before us. Someone that I love was taken from me. Someone they love was taken away from them, but they're in prison. They still have their life.
Coming up, Jennifer's life hangs in the balance, and Officer Morgan's family faces a choice. Will it be mercy?
I think that's a hard thing for anybody to have on their conscience.
Or vengeance?
We wanted to press further for the death penalty.
In the fall of 2007, time was running out for Jennifer Hyatt. Her trial date looming, she faced certain conviction for the murder of prison guard Wayne Morgan. And the dead man's family was pushing for the maximum punishment.
We wanted to press further for the death penalty.
Anxious to avoid a death sentence, the defense made one last emotional request for a plea bargain to the victim's family.
The district attorney's office gave us some DVDs of an interview with Jennifer's mother, and we saw her children.
But would the unorthodox defense tactic pay off?
I think that had a lot to do with, kind of softening my heart a little bit.
The Morgan family relented. With their consent, prosecutors started plea negotiations. In exchange for a life sentence, Jennifer Hyatt pled guilty to first-degree murder on September 17, 2007.
I would take it all back if I could, and I would still accept this punishment. I just want you to know I'm sorry.
As a condition of her plea, Jennifer had to sit down face-to-face with Officer Morgan's widow.
She made sure I knew him very well, knew that they had been married for 36 years, knew what she was doing that day. She made sure I knew him, knew who I took.
According to the terms of her plea, Jennifer agreed to testify against George Hyatt.
There's no way I can make up for what I did, but if that's what the family wants, I will do it.
Testifying against George might bring comfort to the Morgan family, but it won't bring closure to Jennifer. No matter how many locks separate them, she says she still fears her former lover. After all, he's already stalked her once from inside a prison cell.
I'm scared to death, because I don't know, does he have hands here too?
It was just kind of a bizarre thing and just very unusual how the scene was being described.
I was like yelling at him and like trying to wake him up, but not reacting at all. No, nothing at all. I want you to go ahead. Are they breathing? Yeah, my dad felt like coughing. Okay, we do the termination in the place on the way, so listen carefully. I want you to go ahead and lay them flat on their back on the ground.
They're walking him through, trying to get him to do CPR.
Oh my God. I just opened up the door and there was blood everywhere. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Chris's parents, 53-year-old Melissa and 48-year-old Roger Blummel, were the quintessential Kansas couple. Melissa started as a bank teller at Chisholm Trail State Bank and quickly rose through the ranks.
Melissa was always there. She would do anything you ask her, and she was good at what she did. She was a great employee.
Melissa put in long hours at work, but her true passion was a gregarious bobcat salesman 5 years her junior named Roger Blummel.
He's the kind of guy that could basically sell anything. Didn't matter what it was. Very friendly, very easy to talk to.
Special occasions, her birthday, you would always see Roger come in the bank with a bouquet of flowers. They were the proverbial couple.
In the early 1990s, the couple married. Roger left his job selling bobcats and brought Melissa along with him.
Roger eventually decided to open up his own business. So he ventured out and started doing sales on his own.
It was mobile contracting supply. Roger and Melissa both worked really, really hard. Both came from families with great work ethics. Melissa was promoted to vice president's position.
The couple had dreams outside of their careers, too.
All of their other friends that had gotten married were able to have kids, and that was always something that they had desired.
Melissa wanted a family very, very badly.
The couple built a home on some rural property outside of town, with plenty of room for children to play. But the baby the Blummels dreamed of never came.
They had been trying for a while, probably about 8 years.
It became evident that it wasn't going to happen for them.
They decided to look into other ways of having a family and started looking through adoption.
Not long after Melissa and Roger contacted a local adoption agency in 2001, a social worker called the Blummels with good news. They had found a potential match. The mother's name was Keisha Schauberg. Born in 1978, Keisha Reyes grew up in sprawling Los Angeles, California. While she enjoyed a typical suburban upbringing, Keisha was anything but conventional.
My grandpa was strict. He always had rules, and Keisha was one that wouldn't care about the rules.
She began to act out in school, not getting the grades that she was getting before. Everything just was declining. Keisha drank beer, she smoked marijuana, she would go party and go to high school parties.
At 17, a discovery momentarily put the brakes on Keisha's wild ways. She learned she and her boyfriend were having a baby. Her boyfriend left her soon afterward, and by the time her son Tony was born in 1995, Keisha was a single mom.
She was more scared than happy. I remember Keisha saying she didn't want kids yet.
During this time in Keisha's life, I believe she was going through a lot of stress and struggles with herself. A few months after she gave birth, she decided to move, and she got up and just left. She told me she hitched a ride from a trucker and ended up in Missouri.
It's in Missouri that Keisha met and fell in love with Chris Schauberg. The couple married soon after, and in 1997, Keisha gave birth to another son, Chris Schauberg Jr. Over the next few years, Chris, Keisha, and the boys bounced across the Midwest.
She was a drug user. They were enabling each other. They were staying in a hotel and not working. At one point in time, they were homeless. They were basically living out of a vehicle.
Then, one night in 2001, while her 4- and 6-year-old sons slept in the back seat, Keisha came to a heartbreaking realization.
She stated to me that she was not fit to take care of her children. She made the decision to give the boys up. She had seen an advertisement for an adoption agency, and she called this 800 number.
The agency told Keisha that they already had a couple waiting, Roger and Melissa Blummel of Kansas. The agency reached out to Roger and Melissa and told them that they had not just one, but 2 boys who needed a home.
I truly believe they would have brought 6 kids home if that would have been the situation. Melissa and Roger had a lot of love to give.
Keisha was sad that she wasn't with Tony and Chris. Keisha was. But she was also happy that the Blummels took them. She had nothing but good things to say about the Blummels. She was very grateful.
Back at their new home in Kansas, Tony and Chris Blummel quickly settled into a new life.
Melissa took 6 weeks of maternity leave to stay home with the boys. In her eyes, those were her children from the very beginning.
I would say within, a few years of them all living together, it has seemed like they had, actually given birth to these 2 boys.
By the time the boys hit high school, the family was a pillar of the Valley Center community.
The boys were polite, well-behaved. They just seemed like very respectable young boys. Both Tony and Chris were very active in sports and other activities.
By February 2013, Tony was a state champion wrestler, while his younger brother Chris had started making a name for himself on the football field.
Melissa was one of those moms that always volunteered to make the dinners for the football players, that would do anything to be involved with the boys.
In the spring of 2013, the busy Blummel family was facing a new chapter as Tony prepared to graduate.
He didn't have any problems in school. He was, a star athlete. He had talked about making plans to go into the Air Force.
But on November 15th, 2013, it appears Roger and Melissa may not live to see Tony or Chris's accomplishments. Just 6 months after Tony's graduation, Chris reports finding his parents unresponsive in their truck.
You see the sheriff pulling up? Yeah, they're right behind me.
Police still found a pulse and signs of life.
Our victims were code red, and in our world, that means it's a serious injury.
Police also find the source of all that blood.
They had both been shot in the head. Valley Center is a small town, so when you hear of a double shooting, you immediately start wondering what happened. Who would do something like that?
Coming up, investigators discover friction within the family.
Melissa had become, I believe, afraid of Tony.
And no one is free from suspicion.
They're in their driveway, possibly dying or dead. He was not very emotional at all.
By 2013, Melissa and Roger Blummel had carved out a nice life for themselves and their 2 adopted sons, Chris and Tony, in Valley Center, Kansas. But on November 15th, Melissa and Roger were found shot outside their home.
Chris called 911 and reported that he had found his parents injured. He made a comment on the call about there being blood.
Still clinging to life, both Melissa and Roger are rushed to an area hospital, while sheriff's deputies turn to Chris, their only witness.
Chris wasn't acting how people would perceive somebody that had discovered their parents shot.
The only person that he could think of who could possibly
come anywhere close to doing this would be their oldest son, Tony.
Police discover the problems began in the spring of 2013, Tony's senior year in high school.
Tony was a successful athlete, a successful kid. It wasn't until he began to pretty routinely smoke marijuana. I mean, this is something completely inconsistent with the lifestyle of a state champion wrestler, and the Plummels were having none of it.
As Tony got older, he resented, I think, the structure that the family had. He didn't understand why there were curfews or why he couldn't do this, and would frequently act out.
There had been a history of problems with Tony and Roger and Melissa in that he had shown a tendency to have some issues controlling his temper. They talked about he had punched a hole in their wall.
Melissa had become, I believe, afraid of Tony. He was a strong kid. He was an aggressive kid.
Things only got worse after Tony's graduation when he was arrested for a DUI.
I think the Plummels really wanted Tony to have a career in the Air Force, but that went to shambles when he continued his drug usage.
Roger and Melissa are personal friends of mine. They had given Tony several chances to make some changes. It seems that they were unsuccessful in that, and eventually Roger made a decision that this was not good for the family to have drugs in the house, so they asked Tony to leave the house.
Chris tells responding officers that in September 2013, Tony had taken off to California. But in early November, Tony suddenly returned to town and made plans to reconnect with their parents.
Tony had been out to dinner with Roger and Melissa that evening.
Now, just hours after meeting with their wayward son, the Plummels are in critical condition.
Initially, we were very suspicious of Tony. Really, why is he in town?
You always start wondering, could it be people closest to them that could be the suspects?
Officers take Chris from the crime scene to the station for a more formal interview.
Supervision wanted as much information from him as quickly as possible. The decision was made to read Chris his rights.
He was asked to explain his activities from that evening, and he declined to speak to investigators.
Chris's sudden reticence raises a red flag with investigators.
Once Chris invoked, we had to look even more strongly at whether or not he was an actual suspect.
Chris was described as unusual by both the deputy and the supervisor. They had said that he showed no signs of emotion.
The law enforcement officers involved at the time thought, here's this 16-year-old kid that has come back and has found his parents, and they've both been shot, and they're in their driveway, possibly dying or dead. He was not very emotional at all.
Then there was Chris's unusual behavior on the 911 call.
We learned that Chris took about 30 minutes to call 911 before he reported his parents being outside. I'm sure that police immediately thought, ooh, that's a red flag right there. Why did this person not call any sooner?
He obviously needs to be ruled out as a suspect before we can widen the net.
While police work to track down Chris's whereabouts that evening, detectives and forensic investigators study the crime scene for clues.
The first substantial piece of evidence that we find on that day is a shell casing inside the vehicle. We identify that the gun that we're looking for is a .25 caliber handgun.
One other thing that struck me, at least as I was first being told about the case, was the fact that they hadn't gotten out of the truck yet. It appears as though Melissa opened the door to somebody. It appeared as though it would be somebody that the Plummels would have known.
But another detail about the scene soon raises questions about the validity of that theory.
We see that the interior door that leads from the garage into the house has been forced open. We go into the house and we start to see things that have been knocked over. And eventually we get into the master bedroom. And in the master bedroom, you can see that drawers have been open, things have been knocked off of the shelving. Somebody had gone through some stuff.
Items had obviously been moved around and placed on the bed. So that area we knew for sure that people had been in, so we focused our investigation there as far as trying to locate maybe fingerprints or DNA, anything that could maybe give us an idea who had been in there and gone through those dresser drawers.
At the time, we believed that somebody maybe had come in the house and actually robbed them, and Roger and Melissa pulled up in the driveway and may have interrupted a burglary in progress.
The idea that the Blummels might have been shot by a stranger opens up even more theories.
We know that Roger is a businessman, so we assigned somebody to look into there. Did somebody have a bad business deal? Was anybody upset with Roger over the sale of something?
She worked at a bank and had authority at the bank. Was someone going there to, hold her hostage and make her go in the next morning and rob the bank?
To try and narrow their search, Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office investigators head to Wesley Medical Center, where life-saving medical procedures are still underway.
Roger and Melissa were in poor condition. One of the things that I was asked to do when I was at the hospital was to try and see if we could figure out their injuries specifically.
Both of the gunshot wounds were on the right side of each of their heads.
It appeared in that first 12 hours that there was a single shooter.
Whoever had attacked the Blummels had likely acted alone. Could that trigger man be one of their adopted sons? Or had someone else set their sights on this prominent local family?
Nobody knew who the shooter was, what the circumstances were.
Coming up, a break in the case leads police in a surprising new direction.
The text message is, "I need a gun to do a job."
Could pursuing this tip be what investigators are looking for to solve this case?
They watched him throw an unknown object into the pond.
For Sedgwick County, Kansas investigators, finding Melissa and Roger's shooter is a top priority. As to a possible motive, a couple of scenarios are on the table.
You go through all the different scenarios. You start thinking, yes, it could be some sort of botched robbery that happened as they were pulling in. But then you also start looking at the people who are closest to them, because anyone could be a suspect.
Had Tony or Chris Blummel fired the shots that struck down their adoptive parents?
It's important as a law enforcement officer to try and keep an open mind.
While police continue working multiple fronts, investigators focus on finding 18-year-old Tony Blummel. It turns out he was looking for them.
Tony Blummel was trying to get a hold of law enforcement because he had been told that something happened to his parents. We talked to Tony and asked him to come down to our office building downtown.
Unlike his younger brother Chris, who has invoked his Miranda rights, Tony is eager to speak to Sedgwick County Sheriff's investigators.
He was asking a lot of questions. He wanted to know if we had any suspects.
Tony is interviewed and acknowledges that he has had a rocky relationship with Roger and Melissa in the past.
Tony says that he moved in with a friend, and while he was there, a ghost from his past sent him a message.
Keisha, who is Tony's biological mom, has succeeded in making contact with Tony on Facebook. Keisha was living at the time with a female named Sean Hamilton, and they were in a romantic relationship with each other.
Tony says that over a decade after she had given him up for adoption, Keisha had turned her life around and now had a 7-year-old daughter, Tony's half-sister.
Keisha's off drugs, raising her daughter, and doing quite the job. I believe she thought that this was her second chance to be able to be the mother that she couldn't be for the boys.
Keisha seemed changed. She seemed happy. She just seemed kind of, I want to say, carefree almost.
Upon my sister Victoria visiting them, she had nothing but glowing reviews as to where Keisha and my half-sister were now. She said that there was a big improvement.
Tony tells detectives that in September of 2013, he decided to make the trip out to San Diego, California to reconnect with his birth mother.
Keisha was crying when Tony walked in the door. She was just like, oh my God, ecstatic.
Tony had told me that he was happy to find his biological mother, to finally come in contact with her.
Tony says after about 6 weeks in California, he began to miss his adopted family. So in late October of 2013, he, Keisha, and her daughter drove to Valley Center. He reunited with his adoptive parents on November 15th.
They had picked him up at the hotel, and they had gone to a Chinese buffet for dinner.
Tony said that as part of trying to mend their relationship and make things better, that was one of the reasons that he went to eat separate with Roger and Melissa that night.
Tony says that his parents dropped him and his half-sister back at the hotel around 8 p.m. That was the last time he saw them alive. Police are able to verify Tony's timeline with hotel staff.
He has an alibi. There's no way to drive from that hotel that he's at to where the Blumels were at. So it's illogical for him to have been the person at the scene.
It's obvious that Tony can't be the gunman. But what about the Blumels' other teenage son, 16-year-old Chris?
We started to try and verify his alibi. He had gone to a wrestling supper. It was the end of the wrestling season, and they always have a big kind of get-together. He left the supper 8:45.
We take a look at the evidence off of Chris's phone when he made phone calls, and that all seemed to be consistent with what we were told.
With both boys ruled out as the shooter, detectives turned to the community for potential clues.
Law enforcement checked all the neighbors, all the areas to see if there's any surveillance. They do find a grainy video.
We're able to really identify when Chris arrived and when we believe Roger and Melissa arrived. The video quality wasn't the best, but we're able to see headlights.
That captured footage seems to verify Chris's story, but it also reveals something else.
We knew that another car had come in earlier than them. They were headed toward the Blumels.
Though the grainy footage makes it impossible for police to identify the make and model of that vehicle, it's clear someone had arrived at the Blumels' home a couple of hours before either Roger, Melissa, or Chris.
That was our best lead. This car appears to be involved.
Then, on the evening of November 16th, 2013, deputies receive grim news.
I get a phone call from the hospital, and they tell me that Melissa has died. Now I'm dealing with truly a homicide, and one of my friends has died.
Melissa passed, but Roger was still alive.
On November 17th, 2013, 2 days after the shooting, detectives at the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office receive a much-needed break in the case.
Sheriff Investigations gets a phone call from the Park City Police Department, and they notify us that they have a kid by the name of Dalton who believed he may have some pertinent information on the Blumel homicide.
I said, is he willing to come in and talk to us? And he agrees to come in and interview. Dalton starts to lay down his background of his ability to get firearms.
According to Dalton, on November 13th, 2013, an acquaintance of his, 18-year-old Braden Smith, contacted him via text message.
The text message is, I need a gun to do a job.
Dalton said that he had turned him down because he was trying to get out of that line of work, out of that life.
Braden was very persistent about it. Contacted him numerous times saying, I know you can get a gun for me. And every time Dalton would say, no, I'm not.
Dalton says that when he heard the Blumels had been shot just 2 days later, he knew that Braden must somehow be involved.
The case basically turns on that text message and Dalton coming forward. We do backgrounds and try and figure out who Braden Smith is.
And we find out that he is part of a group of kids up in the valley that have been selling dope.
Sedgwick County has a problem with burglaries. Could this possibly be a person who was looking to break into the residence to steal items or find money to support their habit? And Roger and Melissa interrupted that when they came home.
At this point, we had made a decision to put up surveillance on Braden.
With Braden now under surveillance, detectives make their next move.
Braden is contacted by phone and asked if he would be willing to come in and tell us his side of the story. But prior to coming up to the office for the interview, the surveillance followed him to Chisholm Creek Park.
And they watched him throw an unknown object into the pond.
Coming up, the list of possible motives is narrowed down from several to one.
He would get a significant amount of money. He was going to use it to get his drug business off the ground.
And a tangled web of conspiracy grows.
He knew that he had had aspirations to be a hitman.
On November 19th, 2013, 18-year-old Braden Smith has been brought in for questioning after a Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office surveillance team spied the teen disposing of something in a local pond. Investigators believe that item might be the weapon that had been used to shoot Melissa and Roger Blummel.
Roger Blummel had a gunshot wound to his head, but he's still alive, although his wife passed.
We're looking for what we believe to be the murder weapon, is a .25 caliber pistol.
When Sedgwick County investigators start to press the teen about the shooting, Braden doesn't put up a fight.
He came up for our interview and ultimately ended up confessing what had happened.
As it turns out, Braden has a connection to the Blummel family, courtesy of their 18-year-old adopted son.
We figure out that he is actually a friend of Tony's. The group in Valley Center that Braden and Tony had run with, they were consuming high-grade marijuana.
Braden knew that Tony and Keisha had reconnected through social media. He talked about them going out to California to meet up with Keisha.
This plan seemed to be that they were going to go out to California and begin to grow marijuana legally. They could stay with Keisha for free.
Tony and Braden stayed with Keisha, myself, and her daughter in San Diego.
However, Braden says that their dreams of a California weed empire wilted within weeks.
They got out there and very quickly realized nobody needed them in a dispensary.
I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and there was 4 adults and a child there. I'm working, nobody else is. Braden and Tony are constantly smoking. Not even 3 weeks. Keisha is into it. All they do all day is sleep, play video games, and get high. 6 weeks. At that point, that was the last straw. I told Keisha that her and the boys, you need to leave, you need to get out.
According to Braden, that's when the group decided that they had no other choice but to travel back to Kansas.
Braden had shared with us that when they had left California to come back to Kansas, when they were traveling, they had a discussion about getting rid of Roger and Melissa.
Tony knew if his parents were gone, he is their legal child, and that he would stand to inherit money.
He believed that he would get a significant amount of money. He was going to use it to, get his drug business off the ground.
Braden says that he, Keisha, and Tony hatched a plan.
Keisha was going to murder the Blummels, and that Braden was going to be there with her to assist. So the plan is hatched for Tony to take them to dinner, and in so doing, then he would allow Keisha and Braden Smith to go back to the home and be there waiting for the Blummels to return.
However, as the day for the murder grew closer, Braden says he began to have second thoughts.
In Braden's own words, he chickened out.
He was told to find somebody to replace him, and so that's when he contacted his friend Drew Ellington.
Braden knew that Drew had aspirations to be a hitman.
Braden asked him if he'd be interested in making $1,000, and Drew told him yes.
On the 15th, Braden had met up with Drew and given him 2 firearms.
Braden tells police that after that, he has no idea what happened. As to what he had tossed in the park pond earlier that day, Braden admits they were firearms, but he claims neither weapon had been the gun used in the shooting.
We do find 2 pistols through searching the pond. One of them is a .25 caliber, but we don't know at this point if it's the weapon that was used or not.
While detectives await answers from the state lab, police focus their efforts on finding 18-year-old alleged conspirator Andrew Ellington.
Once Braden gave us all of his information, we had enough probable cause to arrest Andrew Ellington. We arrested him. He didn't seem surprised.
He's then brought up and he confesses to us about his involvement.
According to 18-year-old Drew, after being briefed on the plan on November 15th, he and Keisha had driven to the Blummel's house while Tony took his parents out for dinner.
Their whole plan was to make this homicide look like Roger and Melissa had interrupted a burglary.
They went to the home. We knew from the evidence that they sort of, say, ransacked or gone through certain areas of the home.
A little after 8:15 that evening, Drew and Keisha received a phone call from Tony.
Tony let Andrew know that he was back at the hotel and Roger and Melissa were headed home. When Roger and Melissa pulled up to the residence, Keisha and Drew basically ambushed him in their truck. Drew was at the driver's side of the vehicle. Keisha was at the passenger side of the vehicle. And when she opened the passenger side door, she shot Melissa almost immediately. Drew indicated to us that there was a delay of a few seconds, and then Keisha leaned in and shot Roger also.
Drew says that as soon as the pair arrived back to the hotel, Keisha delivered the news to Tony.
Keisha tells Tony it's done, and all Tony does is says okay, and then that's all the conversation there is about it. Drew says that Keisha got a long sleeve shirt that she wrapped the firearm that she had in and gave that to him along with Melissa's purse and told him that he needed to get rid of them.
So Andrew drove out to a residential area and saw an area that had a small little creek to it, and he threw the purse out into the water.
A forensic test soon confirms that weapon, and not the 2 tossed in the pond by Braden Smith, had fired the 2 bullets that struck down Melissa and Roger Blummel. On November 19th, 2013, police charged Drew Ellington with capital murder and aggravated robbery. Now, there are just 2 more loose ends to tie up.
On the 19th, the detectives knock on the door at the hotel. And they locate Tony and Keisha there.
While officers escort Keisha to a patrol car, detectives begin digging for answers.
Tony's the first person that they talk to. Eventually, they get Tony to confess. He talks about gaining the inheritance.
However, Tony says that he's not the only one with a motive to kill.
Keisha was the person who spearheaded the decisions in this murder.
Coming up, Tony reveals his mother's darkest secrets.
She's very good at feeding on people's emotions.
And a new revelation makes the shootings all the more tragic.
Tony later comments that this whole thing was all for nothing.
On November 19th, 2013, 18-year-old Tony Blummel tells Sedgwick County Sheriff's investigators that his biological mother, Keisha Schauberg, is the real mastermind behind the conspiracy to murder his adopted parents, Roger and Melissa Blummel. Though both were shot in the head, Roger is still fighting for his life in a local hospital.
Part of Keisha's problem was that she wanted an open adoption. She wanted to be able to continue to have contact with the boys and talk to them. But Roger and Melissa didn't really allow that contact to happen. Their ideology for Roger and Melissa was these 2 boys had been
through a horrible situation. We're adopting them. The former life is over. The new life has begun.
Yeah, I feel like Keisha resented Anthony's adoptive parents. She definitely talked about how much she missed her boys, so I feel like that probably just festered.
Keisha had told Tony that she had even gone so far as to drive up into the area where the Blumels lived because she was going to kill them so she could get her boys back. It was something that was in her head for a while. I think she wanted the boys.
Tony says that once he and his biological mom reconnected on Facebook, Keisha dreamed of reuniting with her younger son too. But Chris never responded to her messages.
Chris wanted nothing to do with her. He didn't want any kind of contact whatsoever. And she thought that that was because of the Blumels.
There seemed to be some sort of misguided notion in her part that if she could just get the Blumels out of the way, then Chris was going to come back into her life and the three of them could live happily ever after.
Keisha was the mastermind of planning this murder.
She's very good at getting people to do what she wants. And she's very good at feeding on people's emotions.
But Tony tells police that after the plan was carried out, he realized that he and Keisha had made a terrible mistake.
They found out that he was no longer in the will and that he wasn't eligible to get any of the money.
Tony later comments in our interviews with him that this whole thing was all for nothing.
We talked to Keisha next and explained to Keisha that they've had all these people confess, and Keisha denies, and denies.
We decided to see if having Tony just come to the interview room door would maybe get some connection with her. And Tony stood in the interview room door and had tears in his eyes and said, "Mom, I told him everything." Keisha stone cold looked at him and said, "I don't know what you're talking about."
That same day, Keisha and Tony join Braden Smith and Andrew Ellington in the county jail on charges of capital murder and aggravated robbery. Investigators break the news of the arrests to Roger and Melissa's families.
I explained to them that Tony was involved. There was a lot of crying, a lot of emotion in that room that morning.
Some of the reactions I remember seeing were disgust, just knowing that an adopted son would do something to their adopted parents who had cared for them for so long.
Just as one stunning revelation washes over the community, another lands like a punch to the gut.
On the 21st of December, Roger dies from his injuries.
Roger would have never wanted to have been without Melissa. That's how close they were.
Now that the case has become a double homicide, prosecutors amend the charges.
They killed two people and this qualified for the death penalty.
With the possibility of the death penalty on the table, Keisha and Tony both plead no contest to capital murder and aggravated robbery in exchange for life in prison on May 15th, 2015.
Tony wrote an apology letter, and after reading it, I just don't grasp the sincerity from Tony. I don't think there's any remorse in Tony.
Keisha never took responsibility for her actions. The judge did not grant Tony or Keisha any possibility for parole.
The pros for the family was just finality. It's done. There's no appeal, there's no risk of the case coming back.
However, life in prison isn't the end of Keisha's story. When the Snapped production team reached out to her, Keisha, for the first time, made a stunning confession.
They learned that Keisha had shared with the production folks that, yes, I killed Roger and Melissa. Really doesn't change anything for me. I knew that back when we solved this case.
But even though Keisha took Melissa and Roger's lives, friends, family, and law enforcement believe that the Blumels' legacy still lives on in their younger son.
Through all this adversity, Chris went on to have one of the best seasons of his life. He was a star athlete, and Obviously now he has moved on with his life and has a career of his own.
Chris is doing amazingly well. He's an amazing person. And for what he went through, I think that he should be really proud of himself.
Chris living out his life positively is a good testament to the Blumels' legacy.
For more information on Snapped, go to oxygen.com. She was a devoted mother who worked hard to raise a young son and a daughter who struggled to fit in.
A good mother that was trying to give her a good life and get her life on the right track.
But when mother and daughter both vanish, a secret menace emerges.
I was shocked.
He was very nervous, very scared for his safety.
Nothing happens like that in Middlebury.
In the heat of summer, a devilish killer collects his due.
They had heard scuffling, they'd heard yelling and screaming.
You would look at him and you would see danger.
He was growling like a lion.
We're hoping she's in there, but you just never know what's behind the door.
Detectives uncover a hotbed of rage, manipulation, and betrayal.
There's no remorse at all. That's frightening.
It was one of the scariest things I've ever seen.
She was just sitting there. There was no crying, really no emotion.
Why she snapped, nobody will ever know.
It's a hot summer day in Middlebury, Indiana.
Middlebury is a quaint little town, village type community in the heart of Elkhart County. Very rural community.
Crime doesn't happen in Middlebury. It's the type of place where you could probably keep your door unlocked, and not have to worry about a thing.
On August 5th, 2005, Middlebury police receive a 911 call from a woman who is worried about her sister, 41-year-old Barbara Kime.
It was reported she hadn't showed up for work, she hadn't been answering any calls.
Barbara was a nurse at Elkhart General Hospital. A very diligent person, very responsible. It was very unusual that she would have not shown up to work.
The sister says Barbara has joint custody of a 5-year-old son, but unexpectedly, she missed a custody exchange that day.
She failed to pick up her son from her ex-husband's residence. From the information that we're receiving, this was totally out of the norm for Barbara.
She was very concerned that something bad had happened at that point.
The caller gives the address of the home Barbara shares with her 17-year-old daughter, Hannah. Police respond to the address and note that a red Pontiac van registered to Barbara Kime is parked outside. The front door is unlocked.
Our initial entry into the house was just to determine that nobody was hurt, injured, unconscious.
The place is eerily quiet.
Hannah and Barbara were both gone. There was no forced entry. There was no signs of struggle. There was no damage that would lead us to assume that there was any foul play.
They were looking for any kind of unusual signs, unusual activity, missing items, just trying to piece together what may have happened.
Then, the patrol deputies spot something that could mean trouble.
Barbara's purse was there, billfold was outside of the purse laying next to it. It appeared to be missing money, credit cards, debit cards, things like that. It's not very common for someone to just walk away from their life and leave everything behind, including their ID. That's very alarming.
Barbara Jo Neff had always lived in Elkhart, Indiana.
Barb was born on May 1st, 1964. I know she had one brother and 4 sisters. She had a very significant, close-knit relationship with her sisters.
Barbara was a nurturer, always caring for those around her.
Everybody said she was a wonderful, wonderful person.
Her compassionate spirit eventually led her to pursue a career in nursing. When Barbara met fellow Elkhart native Alex Stone, an aspiring minister, the two quickly fell in love and married. Soon, the couple had a little girl, Hannah Lynn Stone.
Hannah was born March 22nd, 1988. Her mom, she was happy.
Sadly, over the next 2 years, the couple drifted from each other. Barbara and Alex amicably divorced in 1991 and agreed to share joint custody of Hannah. 5 years later, Barbara seized a second chance at happiness when she married Robert Keim, though Hannah didn't always agree with her stepfather.
Robert was a deputy for the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department, him being a cop. He was very stern on Hannah.
In 2000, Barbara and by then, Hannah was nearly a teenager.
Hannah absolutely adored her little brother, but as much as she loved her little brother, she would tell me all the time, my mom loves him more than she loves me.
Barbara reassured Hannah she loved both her children equally, and the little family settled into a new normal. But then, Barbara and Robert's relationship took a turn, and before Hannah entered high school, the couple filed for divorce.
I don't know what really honestly led to the divorce of her husband. I just know that Hannah had told me at one point that they had to move to a very tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Middlebury.
Once again, Barbara became a single working mother.
Barb was a nurse on the maternity floor at Elkhart General Hospital. She probably delivered thousands of babies. She had a huge impact on a lot of people's lives.
Barbara was also an active member of the Brenneman Memorial Missionary Church.
Barb was pretty well involved, and she did have support of the patrons of Brenneman. Hannah went to a couple of youth group stuff there.
Hannah's dad, Alex, was a Methodist minister at another church. At her last school, Hannah was known as the preacher's daughter. So when she entered high school in her new hometown of Middlebury, she decided to rebel.
Freshman year in high school, she had transferred, and she kind of meshed in with our group of friends because even though we were emo or even goth, she kind of found us as a family, and she blended in very well.
Hannah, who had struggled with feeling loved, finally found a group she connected with.
We would just honestly go out driving around, blasting music along the backcountry roads, speeding, typical teenager stuff. We just thought we were the coolest kids on the block.
Despite the teen rebellion, Barbara loved Hannah unconditionally.
She loved her mom, but you could tell there was kind of like this invisible wall type deal. She didn't have the same mother-daughter relationship that most mothers have with their daughters. But they had their moments. They had their good moments. Barb, she was trying exceptionally hard, between working tons of hours, taking care of a 5-year-old, trying to deal with Hannah, keeping her in line.
It wasn't the easiest life for Barbara, but she loved her kids and she had her faith. It seemed like a new beginning. But one hot day in August 2005, both Barbara and Hannah vanished from their home.
Any person has the right to disappear if they want to and not be contacted if they don't want to. I've done investigations like that before where people have walked away and I've made contact with them and they've said, I'm all right, I just want some time by myself, I don't want family to contact me, and I've dropped it from there. But you never want to just assume that everything's okay. You want to investigate until you find out that that person is okay.
While searching the apartment, police note every detail, not knowing what might become relevant.
There were some cigarette butts that were in a glass in the living room.
The cigarette butts seem to stand out in the otherwise neatly kept home. Investigators check in with the original 911 caller.
Barbara's sisters pointed out Barbara detested cigarette smoke.
Barb hated smoking, her being a nurse, she knows how bad it is for you, and she would not allow cigarettes in that apartment.
We weren't sure if those could have been Hannah's, some friends of hers. With this guy not at home at that time, we didn't know. At that point, there was some suspicious activity, but nothing that screamed out that there had been foul play.
Without a search warrant, investigators cannot process the apartment further, but they do what they can.
We did attempt to go ahead and put on an ATL and attempt to locate with her description. The daughter was missing. Mother was missing. Started thinking there's more to this than just a missing persons. Everything's not right.
After a few hours or overnight, sometimes you don't know. We're putting a vehicle description out there, talking to hospitals, other departments.
Seeking witnesses, police also question neighbors.
We did have an officer go out there and try to, get information, what they heard.
As an Indiana summer heats up, relatives are worried about 41-year-old Barbara Keim and her 17-year-old daughter, Hannah.
The call came out as a welfare check, which means usually to check on a person they haven't been able to contact.
Responding investigators have found cigarette butts in a glass inside their apartment.
Barbara's sisters, they found that to be unusual because she didn't allow smoking in her home.
And Barbara's purse was lying on her bed. It was open. Her billfold was outside of the purse.
Her credit card was missing, and some cash was missing from her wallet.
When somebody leaves behind any means of getting through the day, their money, billfold, ID, that's alarming in itself. When you have red flags like that, you want to err on the side of caution. You have to carry everything to the fullest to make sure that person's all right.
Neighbors have reported hearing sounds of a struggle coming from Barb and Hannah's apartment.
They did not want to call the police department because they don't want to bother anybody with it. Smaller towns, the people tend not to call the police because they don't want to cause any ruckus or report something that's not necessary or waste our time. I've told people millions of times, hey, this is our job, call us anytime, let us decide whether or not something should be done about it.
Middlebury police ask surrounding agencies to be on the lookout for Barbara and Hannah, and Middlebury deputies keep a watch on the home.
Checked on the residents a few times during the night, looking for any kind of movement. Anybody would come back and did not observe any. We were still interviewing people, friends, relatives, and things of that nature.
From the first of an investigation into someone being missing, you want to try to identify the last persons that would have had information on those folks that's verifiable.
As another stifling August day begins, Barbara's ex-husband, Robert Keim, contacts Middlebury police.
Mr. Keim was a law enforcement officer at that time, and he called us with concerns.
Robert confirms that Barbara was supposed to pick up their 5-year-old son from his house the previous day, but she never showed up.
From what we had been told, this is not normal behavior.
Robert tells police he's very worried.
We knew that they were friends, even though they were no longer together. He gave us her cell phone number to try to contact her and all this, and he was very helpful in the investigation.
I don't believe that he was ever a suspect in the crime.
Next, police question Alex Stone, Barbara's first husband and Hannah's father. Alex says he doesn't know where Barbara or Hannah are. The worried father agrees to file an official missing persons report for his missing teen daughter. But without more evidence or a witness coming forward, there's little more police can do. Then, less than 24 hours after the initial 911 call that first sent police to Barbara's apartment, Investigators receive another call from one of Barbara's neighbors who say they just witnessed a new development in the case moments earlier.
There was some folks in the neighborhood who had observed a couple of people who were taking out trash to the dumpster.
The neighbor explains they also saw the people load boxes into Barbara's red van.
They described the female as dark hair and heavy, and the man that was with her as a thin dude.
Neighbors reported them taking one of the vehicles that didn't belong to Barbara.
Patrol deputies rush back to the apartment they'd checked earlier to investigate the new lead.
We gained entry to the apartment by a family member and found the house had been cleaned. The cigarette butts were gone. Her purse and the keys to the vehicle were all gone.
Why would someone clean the home and then take the van? Authorities believe it may have been an attempt to get rid of evidence. But evidence of what?
Somebody had came back later and cleaned up the apartment and stuff to try to hide any evidence, and we didn't know we really had a crime until that point. And things started to kind of speed up after that.
This definitely is escalating. I mean, this is really serious. What we're working here is we're pretty sure we got a kidnapping, abduction type situation.
Investigators update the Be on the Lookout alert to include Barbara's red van, as well as Hannah's vehicle. The new witness statements also allow authorities to subpoena Barbara's cell phone and financial records.
We were able to contact the phone company, and they were able to give us a detailed record of times and places that the phone had been used within that period of time. There was nothing there. There hadn't been any activity.
Barbara's cell phone use had been steady before she was reported missing. Then it stopped abruptly on August 4th.
I decided to go ahead and get a hold of her bank and see if any transactions had occurred on her account in the last 24 hours.
My chief was able to get a bank manager come in on a Saturday, I believe, and pull some records, and we found some ATM withdrawals.
According to the bank records, someone withdrew the money from a teacher's credit union in Middlebury. The transaction was made shortly after 10 p.m. on August 4th, one day before Barbara was reported missing. Barbara's records reveal another ominous fact. She almost never took money out of ATMs.
First thing you think is a kidnapped and being taken to ATMs, forced to withdraw money.
A lot of ATM machines do have surveillance, so that's easy to find out if she's withdrawing her own money or if somebody else is withdrawing money.
Unfortunately, getting the surveillance video will take time.
This happened on a Saturday, and we were doing all this on a Saturday when things were closed. So we were trying to get some information compiled and brought together to continue with more ways of finding her.
Bank records also show another suspicious transaction on the day Barbara was reported missing.
The police were able to determine that a check had been cashed from her TCU account in the amount of $800.
The check was made out for vehicle repair.
And that check had been made payable to Aaron McDonald.
Coming up, investigators race to interrogate a new suspect.
He thought harm was going to come to him by talking to us and giving us the truth.
And everyone fears that Barbara's time is running out.
I think the theme here would be good versus evil.
I got on the radio and called anybody who was available to come help me.
One hot Indiana summer, after Barbara Kime and her teenage daughter Hannah were reported missing, Middlebury, Indiana police trace a check cashed on Barbara's account to a man named Aaron McDonald.
Police went looking for Aaron McDonald to ask him questions about where he came into his money.
We were very fortunate with Mr. McDonald We had contact before on minor issues, and we were able to locate him.
And I think also Derek found him at a friend's house somewhere outside of town, but brought him back in, and I think that's where things really started to turn, was when we brought Aaron in.
On August 7th, 2005, at the Middlebury Police Department, investigators questioned the 17-year-old. Aaron explains he knows Hannah through church and school.
Aaron McDonald, he went to church too. You know, I have a couple friends that, said, oh, he was in my youth group with me. He was such a great kid, and he was.
Aaron insists he knows nothing about the disappearance of Barbara or Hannah. He claims he didn't even know they were missing. He explains the check by saying that he and his friend Nate recently did some transmission work on Barbara's van. Authorities don't buy it.
We knew Mr. McDonald was not a mechanic licensed in any way. We found that highly suspicious.
Investigators ask Aaron to provide contact information for his friend Nate. Moving quickly in hopes of finding the mother and daughter before it's too late, police track down and interview Nate within 20 minutes.
His mom was there, and I do remember that he was very nervous.
Nate was kind of Aaron's alibi, but when they had interviewed Nate, he said, no, Aaron was definitely not with me at this time, at this date.
Investigators press him for more.
He thought harm was going to come to him by talking to us and giving us the truth.
What is the truth that Nate is so afraid to tell?
His mom really encouraged him to tell us what happened for the benefit of Barbara and to find out if she's safe or not. So that's when then Nate came forward and told us what he had heard.
Nate claims that Aaron asked him to lie about receiving the $800 for automotive work. He adds that Aaron told him about a crime, one involving Barbara's daughter Hannah and Hannah's boyfriend, 18-year-old Spencer Krimpitz. Police know Spencer from previous run-ins.
He would walk around downtown in a black trench coat and just cause alarm in a small town. The way he dressed, the way he walked, his demeanor, he wanted to make a statement. He wanted to intimidate people.
Spencer Krimpitz just had a very, I hate to say the word, an evil look in his eye.
Hannah had met Spencer a few months earlier at a place called The Post.
The Post basically was a place for teenagers to hang out. They always had like local bands playing there. They had like a little kitchen cafe type deal down in the basement. And Hannah was hanging out with a group of friends at the Post, and she had met Spencer. And a couple weeks later, she tells me, hey, there's this guy, he's gonna take me out on a date and everything. And I'm like, oh cool, what's his name? And she was like, oh, it's Spencer. When I met Spencer, he just kind of offered me a cigarette, and I said, no thank you, I don't smoke. He's like, why? We're all gonna die anyways. Doesn't matter.
Barbara Kine had real concerns about Spencer, that the subject of their arguments had largely centered on Hannah's relationship with Spencer Krimpitz.
Hannah changed, and everybody knew it. She kind of became withdrawn from our group of friends, and Barb was concerned that Hannah was dating a guy that was a couple years older than her, and she felt like he was kind of steering her down a path that Barb didn't quite agree with. She just had a bad feeling about the guy. Did not like him, didn't like his attitude towards her, towards Hannah.
Barb didn't want Hannah to be with Spencer anymore. She had forbade them from seeing each other.
But the warm freedom of summer brought the teens closer than ever.
Hannah knew she could get away with it during the summer.
Nate claims that this is why Barbara Kime has disappeared. Finally, Nate reveals to police what Aaron allegedly told him.
He said that Aaron and Spencer and Hannah had taken Barbara against her will out into a cornfield and shot her.
It's a stunning new claim, one that rattles authorities.
I remember throughout the initial part of the investigation thinking maybe these kids took Barbara and forced her to give them money, and then all of a sudden the oh wow factor kicks in that this is a homicide investigation.
But why would a teen girl, her boyfriend, and a friend from church murder the girl's mom?
We have the same crimes as the bigger cities, just on a smaller scale. You know, theft and burglary and everything else. But it's definitely rare to have a murder there.
As Middlebury authorities question Nate, police in the nearby town of Goshen are helping out on the search for Barbara and Hannah.
When we came to work that night, Middlebury gave us a description of the vehicles, looking for Barb Kime, and then we got license plate numbers too.
That muggy evening, Goshen officers make a crucial discovery in the parking lot of a motel.
When I drove in there, I saw both vehicles immediately. The plate numbers were identical to what we had been given. And one of them had a broken out window. Plus there was a bunch of vomit on the side of one of the vehicles.
Authorities cannot waste a single moment in determining why those vans are there.
The Goshen Police Department decided they wanted to go ahead and make entry because it was some distance between our town. It was a good 20 minutes, which can make a difference.
I got on the radio and had called anybody who was available to come help me. I got 3 or 4 guys right away, and we put people at the exits and entrance of the hotels. And then we went inside to the front desk, asked if Spencer had registered there.
The motel clerk tells police that Spencer Krimpitz is registered. The clerk doesn't know who might be in his room with him. It has been 2 days since anyone has seen Barbara Kime.
We're hoping she's in there and still alive, of course, but you just never know what's behind the door.
After Barbara Kime and her daughter Hannah Stone were reported missing, investigators believe they have tracked Hannah's boyfriend, 18-year-old Spencer Krimpitz, to a motel in Goshen, Indiana. Goshen police suspect Spencer might be armed, so they hope to surprise him.
We entered unannounced and quickly, because we don't know who's all in that room.
The officers find 2 people inside.
We're both laying in bed, and we announced ourselves police. No resistance at all.
Officers quickly identify the 2 as Spencer Krimpitz and Hannah Stone.
Hannah or Spencer didn't say a word, didn't ask why we were coming in there, didn't ask why they were being handcuffed or nothing.
Authorities transport the suspects to the Goshen Police Department for questioning. 12 miles away in Middlebury, investigators seek to re-interview Aaron McDonald. But before they find Aaron, his conscience gets the better of him.
Aaron had called me at 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday and asked me if I would come to his house in Middlebury. I walked in and he was crying and I hugged him and I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, he said Spencer killed a lady. He goes, and so I was with him. And immediately I went into like a shock. He wanted to leave. He said, "Take me to your house." And I figured that wasn't a good idea. Shortly thereafter, maybe 15-20 minutes, the police came to the door.
The Patrol deputies take Aaron into custody and transport him to the Goshen Police Department, where Hannah Stone and Spencer Krimpitz are being held.
Now that Aaron knew that the other two were found, he came clean and told more of the truth.
Aaron was more of a follower, I believe. He was just a loner, somebody that wanted to be a part of something and be with people.
Aaron, he had a good childhood, he had a good family, but as he progressed through elementary school, he started falling behind, and he struggled. And he'd come home after school, and he would be sad and cry because the kids said he was stupid. He wanted so much to be accepted. He wanted to have friends. I think that played a lot into when he finally was accepted by Spencer. You know, people like Spencer, they prey on people like Aaron.
Aaron tells investigators that Hannah told him she was having problems with her mother, and Hannah was ready to end those problems.
Aaron said that Hannah had planned to have her mom killed. They came over to Aaron's house prior to going to get Mrs. Kime, and they were smoking marijuana with Aaron, and they kept asking Aaron to go with them.
There was a plan to secure a gun, and Aaron McDonald was able to secure a gun from someone he knew.
I think they were holding out to Aaron, hey, you know what, she's got a lot of money. Aaron went for money because in Aaron's mind, if they said that he could get $400, they'd give him $400. I mean, he would have thought, wow, you know, that's like $1 million to him. I mean, it's not right, and I'm not defending him, but he went to take money.
Aaron tells police that the three of them drove to Barbara's apartment, and Hannah came up with a way to get inside without a struggle.
Hannah Stone knocked on the door so that her mother would not be suspicious, and Barbara answered the door for Hannah.
Hannah was at the door, and Hannah said that she needed to get some clothes.
At that point, Spencer and Aaron, who had been hiding near the door, pounced, jumped on her. When they jumped on her, she had made some screaming noises. Spencer tied her up with duct tape, taped her mouth.
While they're doing that, Aaron's going through the house to try to find some money. And they get her debit card.
That's when Aaron and Spencer went ahead and took physical force of Mrs. Kime. Then they proceeded to take her out to her vehicle.
They put her in the van and drove around. Hannah stayed behind. Her purpose in staying behind was so that neighbors wouldn't be alerted. They were concerned that someone might have heard or may come looking for her.
According to Aaron, the men followed Hannah's plan to get cash from Barbara.
They went to various ATM machines to access her account in efforts to get money.
Aaron claims that Spencer then began driving as if he were scouting for a specific place.
Spencer drives around, Aaron said, quite a bit. Keeps her driving around, and finally they go to Napanee in Kosciuszko County.
They were just probably a mile or two past the county line into Kosciuszko County.
According to Aaron, Spencer parked near a field and pulled Barbara out of the van.
She was wondering where she was. Like, she was begging and pleading Spencer, asking where she was.
Aaron says that Spencer began walking Barbara into the field.
Aaron had started to walk in. He had a bad feeling. He got some cold feet. Went back to the van and waited.
Aaron hears a gunshot. Spencer comes back, and Aaron said he was growling like a lion or something. And he was growling, and he had blood all over his face and all over him.
Investigators tell Aaron he needs to take them to the site where Barbara was allegedly shot.
He had given information to police that the body was located in a cornfield He wasn't quite sure, but he felt he could map it out if they drove him. And so they put him in a car. We left Elkhart County and crossed over into Kosciuszko County. He had described a bridge of some sort near where he believed the murder took place. And as we crossed over a little bridge, he had indicated that this was the location.
Coming up, police discover the brutal truth about the fate of Barbara Keim.
Asked her if she did the Lord's Prayer. She said she did, and he said, well, you better start saying it.
How could somebody do this? You know, it just seems so unbelievable.
As temperatures and tensions rise in rural Indiana, Aaron McDonald leads police to what he claims is the location of the body of missing nurse Barbara Keim.
The police officers, at his instruction or direction, went into the field. As you got closer, there certainly was the unmistakable presence of a figure that was on the ground. She was on her back.
The body will later be identified as that of Barbara Keim.
From that point forward, all of the work went back into how did we get here?
To get answers, police interrogate Spencer. Confronted with Aaron's statement and the discovery of the body, Spencer confesses and finally tells investigators everything, including the parts Aaron did not see.
They take her to a cornfield. Spencer put her on her knees, and Spencer was behind her.
Spencer tells her he's going to kill her, says to her, do you want to pray?
He asked her if she did the Lord's Prayer. She said she did, and he said, well, you better start saying it.
That had to be a very terrorizing situation to have a considerable amount of time with people knowing that you're not coming out of this situation alive.
She shakily said the Lord's Prayer, but didn't say amen at the end. And he said, you're not going to say amen?
And then when she says amen, he fires a shot in the back of her head.
And was fascinated by watching her body fall to the ground.
My chief, when he came out of the interview with Spencer, yeah, he was like, wow, that kid scares me. He said that boy's evil.
But the plan to murder Barbara Keim came from her daughter, Hannah Stone.
Both Spencer and Aaron said that Hannah was the mastermind behind this plan. Barb didn't like Spencer and didn't like them being together. So Hannah was just, we can solve all this by just getting rid of my mom. So they concocted this idea to get rid of Barb.
Investigators confront Hannah Stone about her role in the death of her mother. At first, she denies everything.
She didn't know anything, didn't know what was going on. Like she was trying to play the victim. I don't know what happened.
Eventually, Hannah admits she was there at the apartment, but she claims it was Spencer's idea to rob her mother, and she never thought he would kill her. Prosecutors decide to charge Hannah, Spencer, and Aaron equally.
Based upon the evidence, we determined that there were 3 charges: criminal confinement, conspiracy to commit murder, and murder. And so all 3 were charged with the same offense. They all initially pled not guilty.
News of the arrests leaves the small community of Middlebury reeling.
Currently, we have in custody on preliminary charges of murder 3 individuals.
I heard it over the news, and I just dropped to my knees, and I screamed to the point where I was hoarse. Like, I couldn't understand why, what, how.
At the arraignment, Spencer Crimpet seems to enjoy the attention.
I will never forget seeing Spencer. That image will be stuck in my head forever. He was transported from the jail to the courthouse, and the way that he came out of that car, he stuck his tongue out, and his tongue, I felt like it came all the way down to his chin almost. His eyes were glazed over. He just looked like he was possessed by the devil. It was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. I was shocked. Nothing happens like that in Middlebury.
In early 2006, Aaron McDonald pleads guilty.
Aaron McDonald was given an opportunity to enter a plea to the 3 charges, and he gets 65 years for his participation. Did he pull the trigger? No, but he was as responsible as the trigger puller because of his engagement in his activity.
I don't know Spencer and I don't know Hannah, but I know Aaron. I can't wrap my head around how the kid I know and love ended up in that situation. You know, I can't figure it out.
On March 10th, 2006, Spencer Krimpitz pleads guilty to murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and criminal confinement while armed with a deadly weapon.
He said that he basically pulled the trigger, killed Barb Keim to please the girl he loved.
On March 30th, 2006, Spencer Krimpitz is sentenced for his crimes.
I do remember at his sentencing that he said, if you're going to give me life in prison without parole, then you might as well just give me the death sentence.
But the judge made the determination that it would be life without parole.
Spencer decides to give himself a death sentence.
Spencer committed suicide. You know, he took the coward's way out. He decided to take someone.
Han Boy, her little brother, heartbroken and motherless,
Cries. Then someone wake up in the middle of the night crying, "Mommy, Mommy," right after the killing happened.
I just want to end this by expressing my condolences to the family of Barbara Keim. I'm sorry that Barbara was taken from them. I know the pain that they have suffered is certainly a very hard loss.
Barb may not have thought she had such a huge impact, you know, because she was such a humble person, but I think if she had seen how many people had actually turned out at her viewing and funeral, she would have seen a lot of people did care. A lot of people did care and love her.
She was just this devout Christian woman who just loved helping other people out. I feel like the community definitely lost an angel.
For more information on Snapped, go to oxygen.com. Together.
I mean, now we have his truck, but we don't have Furlan.
Furlan Bryant spent his entire life in Van Buren County. The farmlands and the mountains were as much a part of Furlan as he was a part of them.
Furlan was just a good country guy. Furlan, and they lived in the same house. They just didn't live as man and wife. Rental properties around that's available. She didn't have nowhere else to go. That seat was where it's at.
Officers searched the truck for any sign of foul play.
If there'd been blood in it, we'd like to find that, even if it was a small amount of blood. Shell casings from a weapon that had been fired, maybe a weapon itself, but we just didn't see anything, no real signs of any foul play or anything like that.
A search of the nearby woods proves equally fruitless.
There's a couple of us that walked around the woods area up there and looked, but we didn't find nothing but the truck.
Furlan's friends and family disperse. But before sheriff's deputies leave Baker Mountain, there's someone they want to talk to. The owner of the property where they found Furlan's truck, Monroe Mooneyham.
Monroe lived down the road, or not too far from Furlan. Him and Furlan were good friends. They'd grown up in that area and knew each other well. He didn't know why the truck was there. He didn't have a clue. The last time he had checked the property, which was a day or so prior, there was no vehicles there.
Monroe tells them he has just returned from out of town.
Monroe was in Nashville with his wife, Melba Mooneyham, who worked at that time for DCS and was known by all law enforcement.
Monroe's statement indicates that Furlan's truck was abandoned sometime in the past 3 days.
Somebody pulled up there within that time frame. He last checked it till we found it.
The information from Monroe, along with the suspicious state of Furlan's truck, heightens deputies' concerns. They decide they need to speak to Furlan's family, starting with his daughter Pam.
Pam said something's wrong, I hadn't seen Daddy in a couple of days.
Furlan was all the time. Either he was in contact with us every other day or maybe every day. He would always pop in either in the evenings or something.
Pam had taken her concerns to the sheriff's department a couple of days prior. While it was too soon to file an official report, deputies knew to be on the lookout.
We knew something was going on, but we didn't know what at that point in time.
Pam tells them her biggest concern is that Furlan and Jerry hadn't been getting along since Jerry moved back in.
Him and Mama was arguing. He'd come to the house and he'd be crying and upset about her.
Pam worries that if Furlan saw no hope in reconciling with Jerry, he might do something drastic.
We were all thinking something bad. But my first thought was suicide, because he was so upset over Mama.
Pam said they took their concerns to Jerry.
My sister called Mama and she's like, we can't find him. Where's he at? She said something about he's took off to Montana. I think it might have been like a dream of his to go to Montana, but not seriously. So Pam was like, no, Mom, something's wrong.
Pam doesn't believe that Furlan took off to Montana. Neither does law enforcement.
Furlan wasn't that type of person. He just wasn't one to pick up and go off somewhere like that. He was a hometown man that liked to stay in his hometown.
Investigators suspect there's something they are still missing.
He wasn't one to make enemies. I mean, he just wasn't that type of individual. But just in case, has he been in some sort of argument, or is there some...
Approaching summer of 2005, sheriff's deputies in Van Buren County, Tennessee, are ramping up their search for 58-year-old Jerry could take possession of the house.
She was trying to make him leave, and he wouldn't leave.
Chief Deputy Evans heads to Jerry and Furlan's home with the hope of presenting his questions directly to Jerry. Once there, his mission takes a bizarre turn.
She was laying on the couch, and I knocked on the door, and she just laid there, and then I knocked harder and harder. Finally, she aroused enough that she come trying to open the door. It's just like she's drunk. And when she unlocked the door, she was trying to talk to me, and everything was real slurred. And I thought she was having a stroke.
He found Jerry in a stupor kind of condition where her eyes were bugged out. It was obvious that she needed some help.
Deputy Evans calls for an ambulance. Once Jerry has been admitted to a Nashville hospital, law enforcement and her family learn that she wasn't having a stroke.
She had overdosed, took a bunch of pills.
Allegedly, she had attempted to commit suicide.
She was really bad off. They were talking like she might not live, or she had took all them meds. She might not come back out of it.
What was eating at Jerry Bryant to the point that she attempted to take her own life?
A lot of red flags were sent up, that could be regret, that could be guilt, that could be anything.
Everything's happening just one right after the other. Which even makes me think more, there's some foul play going on here somewhere.
With Jerry unconscious, deputies won't be talking to her anytime soon. They head back to Jerry and Furlan's home, where they are met by the couple's friends and family. Together, they search the property.
We decided that we was going to go in and check all the proximity of the property and see what we could, see if we could come up with anything. We started out just right in behind the house. There were several brush piles sitting behind the house. And you could smell like a faint smell of something. You could barely make something out. I could smell a little bit of something that just wasn't quite right. I don't know how to describe it other than just a bad smell. He kept following the scent, led him up to the brush pile, and then there was netting on top of that. Marty was like, "Hey, you leave that brush pile alone." I was like, "Why?" And he said, "There's a freaking snake."
There was a dead snake laying there on it.
It was rotten, and I associated it with that dead snake. It didn't matter to me. I'm scared to death of snakes.
Soon afterwards, the search party calls it a day. Less than 24 hours later, deputies get a call from one of Ferlin's friends. He says they had resumed their search of the grounds and that they had just found something troubling.
We started looking around the house. Somebody had actually noticed a burn pile down there. In our county, everybody that lives in the communities has got some type of little burn pile. There was a couch laying over top of it. Well, I flipped the couch over. Then we started looking and going through all the stuff that was burnt.
I'm digging around in this burn pile and I'm trying to find something. I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm kind of crazy myself at the time, And I found his wallet and the bottom of his boots. What man leaves the house?
Individuals that worked homicide cases on a regular basis. We really went over the house with a fine-tooth comb. Didn't come up with anything that would lead us to believe that anything happened in the house.
Law enforcement fans out to question area neighbors.
There were some neighbors that saw the smoke going. They heard the gunshots but didn't think much about it because being a rural area, it's not uncommon for people to be out shooting in the woods, target practicing, or to burn the trash. That's our whole community. Everybody likes to get out and shoot guns.
Having gleaned all they can from the crime scene, investigators are eager to talk to Jerry. When they check in with her doctors, they learn she is still unconscious. They also learn that when she first arrived, she made some concerning comments to hospital staff.
She starts talking out of her head, talking about Ferlin being dead, talking about the brains, and putting the brains back in the head.
Jerry's cryptic statements only fuel investigators' suspicions.
We were pretty sure that it wasn't hallucinating as much as she was definitely recalling some events that had happened.
Then, investigators get word that the autopsy is complete. The medical examiner confirms what everyone already suspects.
We were able to come up with enough medical records to put it together that it was Ferlin's body.
Ferlin's death is also no accident.
Ferlin was shot 2 to 4 times with a .22 caliber round. Some type of a blunt instrument was used against him, breaking some facial bones, some arm bones, and then after that point, his body was burned.
There were traces of gasoline found on some of the clothing that belonged to Ferlin.
If Jerry killed Ferlin, investigators need proof. They head to the Highway 30 market.
The Highway 30 market was a place not only did Jerry work at, but Ferlin would go down and hang out, talk to people, drink coffee or whatever.
Jerry's employers reveal that over the past few weeks, Ferlin had come to the store with some bizarre stories about Jerry. He believed that on more than one occasion, she had tried to poison him.
One of them involved coffee not smelling right, smelling like some kind of bug repellent put into it. And then on another occasion, he found medicine or a lot of white stuff in the bottle of a soft drink that he was drinking.
He had stated to the owner of the store that he thought she had put some of that in his coffee, and he felt like the Items in the bottle was put in the refrigerator for him to drink.
A store employee clearly remembers a disheveled Jerry coming by the store in the early morning hours of June 6th.
She had went to the local store early in the morning, bought a lot of gas.
A few hours later, she returned.
Supposedly was going to mow grass, and then went back and bought some more gas that same day.
Was Jerry really doing yard work? Or was she trying to cover up a crime? Investigators continue hitting up gas stations in the county. They find that the Highway 30 market wasn't the only place Jerry made a purchase that day.
She bought like 5 gallons of gasoline, and then later on she buys, another quantity of gasoline and says, she's using that to mow her yard. That's a lot of gas to run through a lawnmower to mow 1 yard.
The gas purchases are the proof investigators need to place Jerry under arrest. But there's one problem. Will Jerry live long enough for them to do it? Coming up, investigators zero in on a motive.
They worked their whole life for it. Neither one of them wanted to give it up.
But some bizarre claims could bring a new theory to light.
Mom had said that people had broken the house and made her take all them pills.
As 48-year-old Jerry Bryant recovers from a suicide attempt in a Nashville hospital, investigators in Van Buren County, Tennessee, are building a case against her for the murder of her ex-husband, 58-year-old Ferlin Bryant. On June 18th, 2000...
I think she went and got the 22, shot him dead. Then she drug him to the burn pile, tried to dismember his body, and figured out that there's going to be a lot of work. Got some gas. But when the body didn't burn like it should, out comes the couch. And you try to light that up and use it to accelerate the fire.
We just knew he was killed in that area, and then his body was taken up on the hillside there and put in the woods and hid under the brush. It was going to be a circumstantial evidence case, which meant we had a harder burden of proof than if somebody had just shot somebody and we had witnesses who did it.
In March 2006, Jerry's trial begins at the Van Buren County Courthouse in Spencer, Tennessee. As far as Jerry's motive, prosecutors argue that when Earl dumped her, she went back to Ferlin. Only she didn't want Ferlin, she wanted their Baker Mountain home all to herself.
They had been advised that in a marital dispute like that, if two parties can agree on it, then the easiest option is just to say, we'll sell it and split it down the middle.
They worked their whole life for it, and neither one of them wanted to give it up.
The only way she saw to do it was to shoot him, and then try to dispose of the body.
We think it was premeditation. She intended to do it because she said she would never give up that house.
Prosecutors reveal that upon Ferlin's death, Jerry would inherit the home she cherished and a decent chunk of change to boot.
There was a $50,000 life insurance policy Ferlin had on his life that Jerry was still the beneficiary of.
Jerry's defense attorneys opt not to put her on the stand. Instead, they hone in on whether or not Jerry was physically capable of committing the crime.
Their deal was that someone else done it, and it was most likely the boyfriend.
Prosecutors fire back, pointing to the fact that there is no evidence linking Earl or anyone else to the crime.
As we looked into this, we had nothing that led us to believe that Earl had any part in this.
Prosecutors argue that all of the evidence points directly to Jerry as the killer.
It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, but you're missing a few of the pieces. But it's obvious from what pieces you have that it could only be that one person, Jerry Bryant.
Ultimately, both sides rest their case, and the jury reaches a verdict. They find 48-year-old Jerry Bryant guilty of second-degree murder. She is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
The waiting up to the verdict was the hardest part. But once it was read that she was guilty, I felt a little bit of sense of relief. I felt some satisfaction maybe for Furlan.
He didn't have to raise me. And he did. I mean, he took me to the doctor, he worked and took care of me.
Furlan loved his kids. He also loved Jerry, and that love ended up costing him everything.
Unfortunately, sometimes love is blind, and you overlook things that the person you're in love with is doing to you. You just don't want to believe that they would do that to you. And he was really in love with Jerry.
I think he would have always pestered her to death trying to get her back. If you could bring him back right now, he would say, let her out of prison. I forgive her. He would. I know he would.
For more information on Snapped, go to oxygen.com.